Hello everyone, welcome back to another stream. Hope you're doing well as always. Keat, Martin, Mortis, Banune. I actually don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it like Banoon, Banuune, all that stuff. Galamoth, welcome on in. Hope you're having a good day. So, yesterday on stream, what did I even look at? I have the memory of a goldfish apparently. We watched, What Are the Shadowlands? No, we did not watch that one. Okay, the thing wasn't all the way down. We watched Shadow of the Erdtree full breakdown, Elden Ring lore by Cosmos, and then we watched What is the Purpose of the Wandering Mausoleums by Rada Tosker. So that's pretty much all the time that we had for yesterday. Actually still went over, which is perfectly fine. Today I figured we can continue with where we left off with Shadow of the Erdtree analysis and speculation by Mostenier, with the Veiled Crucible being front and center on the thumbnail there. And then Otos has been begging me to watch a bunch of his videos, so I figure I can at least get one out of the way now with Elden Ring's Metaphysics, Duality, and Nonduality, and then lore titles cut off. So those are the two that I have queued up for today, and if we have a little bit more time after that, I could probably find something else to throw on, but I have a feeling we'll probably go over even with just these two. So, alright. You know it's not a good day? Quiet, Mortis. We don't talk about the planets. Anyway, yeah, for anybody wondering, I was crashing on Destiny 2 and not having the best of times in the Pantheon, I tell you what. But, you know, sometimes it'd be like that. Anyway, Banune asked, have I ever considered Grand Sax to be alive? I mean, yes, but also no. The fact that it's like a dragon and is made out of stone has always been a bit of a mystery to me as to whether or not the dragons may have been originally stone and could have been granted life through lightning in the very beginning of time. As for Grand Sax, I feel like he's dead, but if he came back to life, I don't think I'd be entirely shocked with the way that FromSoft has rolled out their games. You made a video about him being alive? Oh, that's cool. Yeah. So I actually only learned about your channel very recently. If you have anything you want me to react to on stream and like more direct feedback, feel free to either post it in the Discord or leave a comment on this stream itself, not the chat. Because if you leave a comment, I'll get the notification or whatnot to remind myself to go back and add it to my list, and I'll do so. And Doggo, nice to see you again. Okay. I don't need to, it'd be cool, but not a must. Oh, no, I wouldn't feel obligated. I mean, if anything, it's kind of always fun for me to get new perspectives, even if I vehemently disagree with them, and will challenge you on the lore hill to a duel to the death or whatnot, which is a lie because I'm not willing to die on any hills with Elden Ring lore at this point. Anyway, yeah. Asinex, more lore, welcome on in. Okay, so I feel like we're probably going to spend a lot of time checking out these videos, so let's go into Most Nair and their video on the Shadow of the Erdtree analysis and speculation. And I think this is the first video I've seen by them. Narrated by Jack Sun.
On February 21st, 2024, From Software and Bandai Namco Entertainment released the Shadow of the Erdtree gameplay reveal trailer, and in a spark of inspiration, I decided that I'm going to take a shot at analyzing it in its entirety. We're going to see if I'm right or wrong come June 21st, but for now, all of this is speculation with either a lot of faith or a lot of intelligence.
Well, you know this is already a crackpot video when they got the Consecrated Snowfield OST going on in the background. But no, it's all perfectly fine. Ratatoskr came out with a new video. Another one aside from the Mausoleums. I didn't see it. Honestly, I haven't really been on YouTube pretty much at all today, though. I'll need to check it out. Hey, Jordo, and Happy Hep. Welcome on in.
There's not too much arcane, however. This DLC looks to be incredibly dark. The entire trailer had a color palette that's what one could consider a much more twisted or dark version of the base game's palette. While many base game areas all used very primary and saturated colors, the Land of Shadows is dark and twisted, rotting in a way that can be reminiscent of Caelid, except instead of Scarlet Rot being in the equation, it's Deathblight instead. If you look to the right of this legacy dungeon here, you can
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about that yet, analyzing it color theory-wise. I mean, he might be right, but I'm also reminded of that very verdant green forest in another part of the trailer. Obviously, we've seen like what looks to be congruent to like swamps, which may or may not contain Deathblight. I don't know if the land itself has Deathblight here, so I remain skeptical.
See what looks like dark branches sticking out from somewhere. While I don't think the land is going to be completely taken over by Deathblight, its presence is going to be felt far more here than it was in most base game areas. Deathblight was a very common issue for those who had troubles fighting Wormface, and the many...
Alright, hold on, let me see if the quality is bad on my... Oh, why is it at 4? Okay. Okay, yeah, that looks much better already. So yeah, going back to the whole Deathblight stuff, the roots that I see coming out of that castle don't... I guess I'll pull up a picture, give me a second. They don't entirely look like Deathblight roots to me, and... part of the reason I say that is because Deathroot tends to have like these fin-like things and looks more lively and less plant and actually like rooty, if that goofy ass sentence makes any semblance of sense. So okay, so yeah, I'm definitely not on board with a lot of the stuff proffered so far, but we'll see where it goes.
Any enemies similar to this boss, but this leech-like creature gives me a somewhat similar vibe to Wormface in its application, or perhaps importance to Deathblight. Though what we can see of its mouth and body both resemble a leech far more than a face full of worms, though such a creature is still representative of the spread of death. Or perhaps leeches here are representative of a more medicinal application in a way. Maybe it's that they feed on the Deathblight and we simply get in the way of their hunger. I'll be expanding more on the world as a whole at the end of this video, but it is notable that the Land of Shadow seems to already fester with the consequences of Godwin's death. Early in the trailer, we see this cave interior with purple flowers, which is obviously associated with sleep. With it, we have...
So, just like a content creator, I don't know if this is like advice, but this is just take it as like feedback, either good or bad, however you feel about it. So there was that long fade to black transition, and then I felt like that would have actually been a good spot to put it in like the part 2 thing that says Trina's Cave. I've been wondering whether I should like pause it and read these out loud or whatnot. And of course, like this is just a little bit of the awkwardness of, you know, sharing it and like this whole live format, but maybe that's something like worth more consideration for their next video, or even like mine in the future, because it always does feel a bit awkward to me to try to figure out what kind of transition between one scene to the next feels most natural, especially if you have like these kind of dedicated scene breaks. I don't know what to call them. And Eric Williams and Rob, welcome back to the stream. And Mercy, nice to see you all again.
Cave interior with purple flowers, which is obviously associated with sleep. With it, we have this sleeping
and
humanoid.
Nectarine, my fault.
Their mask is engraved with some kind of sleeping face, which could suggest that this is sort of a follower of St. Trina's. Sleep is certainly going to play a big role in this DLC, and I wonder if this is an introduction to a new enemy type. Alternatively, this may genuinely just be some random cave area, as we already know from later shots in the trailer that caves and catacombs will be making a return. With the standards we've got...
Yeah, I've wondered if this thing is kind of thematically related to the Zamorians. I'm a little bit doubtful that it would be like a direct link, but they look kind of similar. But of course, doing our little Rorschach comparisons, you could also say this might look like the Murray style mask. Or, I mean, if you really want to go the whole Pepe Ofnir route down here, you can say that it almost looks like Celadon, just without the glintstone and the stone around it. This is obviously America's secret daughter, Millionor. Oh no. The daughter of America and Gwyn.
Got for a FromSoft DLC, I doubt we'll be getting many repetitive cases like in the base game, instead getting unique ones along the lines of Cave of the Forlorn. We get confirmation that this area is a cave when this very strange skeleton thing appears. We can see the same purple Trina's lilies on the floor, growing from the water. This is probably one of the weirdest enemies in the entire trailer. Being a skeleton riding a horse, wielding a weapon that almost looks like the placenta that Orphan of Kos beat you with time and time again. This being seems to be fused with its horse, with its color and material being somewhat reminiscent of the quicksilver used to create the mimic tears.
Memories of
the backside
screams.
of the horse seems to be melted or molding into the floor, possibly sticking to the ground. It gives off a very strong Kelpie vibe. If you don't know what a Kelpie is, it's a watery horse from Irish and Scottish folklore that lures humans to touch it. The skin of the Kelpie and the human mend together, and the human is dragged beneath the waters to be drowned, melding into the horse fully.
And Mortis has said in chat, as well as others have on previous streams, that they think it looks more like a Knuckleaby. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I could see where pretty much everybody's coming with all of these comparisons. Yeah, that thing is just super cool to me. Hope we will have a decent amount of lore to accompany it, rather than having like, I almost said like an Astel situation, but close enough, I suppose. And then Keat said, you think that there might be something other than Deathblight in the Shadowlands. That's probably a good possibility, to be honest, yeah.
Perhaps whatever that strange obsidian-like face is caused such a thing to occur between horse and rider.
It's pronounced Kent?
This
okay,
area
thank you.
is, I think, the biggest showcase of how different the DLC's lightings and visuals are. This place looks eerily similar to Raya Lucaria, with what looks like glintstone hanging from the ceiling. However, this glintstone is almost purplish in color, which to me implies the presence or focus of gravity magic, which we do see a bit more of later on. The architecture of this place reflects Raya Lucaria as well.
And as I said before, I think you could also compare it somewhat to the Carian Study Hall. So, just like the whole Academy Glintstone sorcerer vibes.
This strange person
hey, Jay Moore, welcome back.
Some sort of reflection of Rennala, though the way they're lit and presented feels almost somewhat malicious. Sort of like how Tanith is. For some reason, the first thing that came to mind when I saw them was Nashandra, a slightly taller humanoid figure who passively sat at their throne. As we see the
I think part of that is because her gaze seems to be downcast, so it looks like she's looking down upon the player. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. Not that I disagree. I just don't know. Like, I see where he's coming from, entirely, but appearances can be misleading in FromSoft games. Especially when we consider characters like the Chapel Dweller in Bloodborne. That's Miquella? Okay, Galamoth. And Jay Moore said, you wonder if the Chakram Omen is a transformed version of the Sleeping Mask character. Interesting. Why do you think that? Is it because, like, the Omen thing is wearing a mask? Because the fact that the Omen thing's mask is gold rather than a kind of ivory-looking thing makes it seem less likely they'd be related. But yeah, I'd be curious to hear more. Hey, Methoda, nice to see you again. It's going pretty well. How about you?
Tarnished approached them without any cover. It seems like they'll be an NPC with some sort of quest line or task for us. As many have pointed out, they seem to be the figure depicted in the Dectus medallion and in the Carrion Study Hall hourglass statue. Whoever they are, they're a prominent figure in the Carrion world, likely some pioneer of magic. In this shot of the trailer, we see what looks like yet another Tree Sentinel-esque enemy, doing the same pose that all of them open up with when engaging with you in a fight. However, this guy's got some sort of spear-headed sword that glows with purple electricity, obviously signaling gravity magic. Rather than riding a horse, he rides a giant armored boar, giving me strong Dark Souls 1 flashbacks. Whoever he is, he's probably tied to the magic area we see earlier on. More notably, the tusks of the armored boar seem to reflect the tusks on Radahn's helmet, which would make sense given the gravity connection.
That was funny.
While I don't have much to say on this particular poison swamp itself, take note of the armor being worn here. It looks like feathery wings, reminiscent of Eileen the Crow, or alternatively, the wings of Mohg as he reaches his second phase. With the DLC's darker tone, it's very likely we're going to have much more traditional, edgy-looking armor and clothing, which I can't wait for.
And of course, we could compare it to the Ravenmount assassin attire and whatnot.
There are a couple of cool things to note in this one shot. First, we've got omen-horned creatures, which I'll talk about more later. Second, we have a catacomb entrance in the background, meaning a definite confirmation of side content. Third, we've got curved swords and a reverse grip, with an Ash of War that seems to start off with a built-in dodge.
Oh man, the sound is a little bit jarring.
Sword. In our next shot, we've got throwing knives, which seems to have a dedicated set of movement animations rather than simply being thrown, like the default throwing knives. This is a weapon, not a consumable, which is a really cool new addition that provides more mid-range option. As we move along, I just have to point out that...
Yeah, this makes me wonder if and or how many DLC weapons will be accessible in like the base game, because a lot of this stuff is really cool, and I think it'd be really cool to go through a completely new game having access to some of this equipment, but it would also kind of suck if you just needed a friend to drop it. But I mean, that's just kind of how it is now, which is unfortunate. So for the umpteenth time, I will go ahead and espouse the need for a new game minus option where you could just start it with whatever starting equipment you wanted. Anyway, hey Q with I, nice to see you again. Did you make it in time? You're a little bit late, but you know, that's not really a problem. Glad to have you regardless. And Galaxy Dragon, nice to see you again. You really want the kicking weapons? Would go with your fist build, go full martial arts? Yeah, for real. All right, Methoda, hopefully you feel better soon. But thanks for dropping in. Galamoth said, didn't they say we can travel freely between the DLC and the base game? Well, I feel like even that is a really big asterisk if the DLC truly is only accessible after Radahn and Mohg have been defeated, though, you know?
This shot here. We've got Bloodborne-esque clothes that feel reminiscent of Blackhand Goddard from Dark Souls 3, looking like some kind of cleric-related set or possibly something like the Preceptor's altered long gown. He's doing High Monk from Sekiro.
Oh my god.
Which seems like it's either going to be a new weapon class or some kind of equipable item or consumable that lets you do martial arts. It's a huge addition that I'm seriously excited for, given how much more dynamic and flexible shinobi arts are compared to a lot of Ashes of War. It also indicates a different school or group from any we've seen before, a fighting style completely unfamiliar to us. With its hand-to-hand nature, it's possible that this could be related to Hoarah-Loux, but I think it's more likely that it's our Elden Ring equivalent of the Senpu monks that this move originates from. Finally, the knight who he's kicking seems like one of those tough, plumed helmet knight enemies who normally use spears and swords in the base game, except this one has a twin blade. It seems like even the basic repeated faction enemies are going to have new variations and movesets.
Yeah, I don't know if this is like a basic dude. Just like the location where this is makes him almost seem like a bigger deal, which would be an interesting twist, but I don't know. If it is a normal like plumed knight type dude, I'm perfectly happy with that. Having the twin blade thing is pretty cool, and we do see the Tarnished use it later on in the fight against Messmer. So, yeah. Stella, nice to see you again. Pigsy, welcome back in. And then Throw Some Cheese 12, welcome into the stream. Was it you the one that was going around throwing cheese on everyone's cars? You did say the only requirements for the DLC is that you beat Radahn and Mohg, so you just got to beat them both in the DLC content boss at level 1. Yeah, no problem. Indeed. Galamoth says, Hoarah-Loux, Master of Karate. Would that make him the Dayman? Hey Drake, nice to see you again.
This gigantic fiery pot is, well, I think it's a craftable throwing item, but it could also be a weapon under a throwable class, like the knives, which could be completely absurd and also really funny. Alternatively, it could be a weapon art, but I can't think of what kind of weapon it'd be the weapon art of unless we smash things with a giant pot and threw it as a weapon art. There isn't much I can comment on for this very cool fellow in his fully automatic.
So for real though, now that we got these giant pot bombs, we need cracked walls Zelda style or even like Dark Souls 2 style, but better. Does that pot look weirdly low poly? That's a FromSoft game. You're just not actually supposed to look so closely most of the time. Them's the breaks.
There isn't much I can comment on for this very cool fellow in his fully automatic crossbow, but his armor is in a style that we haven't really seen in Elden Ring pretty much at all, with this very edgy style similar to Gothic armor, with its lack of colorful ornamentation and simple angular plating, suggesting that he's either a one-off NPC we find from a distant land, or that we're getting some sort of faction that revolves around this more simple Gothic style.
For real though, like this is probably one of the most similar to Guts armor sets that I've ever seen in a FromSoft game. Just if you can imagine the crossbow thing being in the arm itself, it would just, lend to that theory even more. Just take the helmet off, give him like the Guts hair and face, and it's almost GG right there.
Frankly, I don't know what to make of this spell at all, other than it's probably Crucible related, with the horns sprouting from the bear's head. It seems to be akin to Greyol's Roar, channeling a beast via communion to temporarily transform into one. I'm assuming that this isn't the only bear-related spell we get. We may potentially fight a beast like this in-game, acquiring some of its moves later on just as we do dragons. Next we see these two player characters fighting. We know the Red Dancer's an NPC and not an enemy, since you can see the end of their roll at the very start of the shot. More interestingly, this dancer has a unique moveset with her curved swords, which could possibly make it one of the newly introduced weapon categories. I believe that this may be a new paired curved sword weapon type, which may also include the reverse grip swords we saw earlier on.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know about weapon types. I feel like the attacks that she was using is very similar to the flowing blade, or whatever it's called. It might be worth doing a comparison shot of the two. And the fact that she's dual wielding them is pretty cool. I kind of wonder if it could be something similar to the ornamental straight swords or Radahn's blades, where if you wield one, you can use it's like Ash of War essentially, and that will allow you to effectively power stance, but still be able to guard. So I've wondered whether something like that's been going on. Oh yeah, and Pigsy, we also watched a video yesterday. I think Cosmos pointed it out that the red dancer's blades do seem somewhat reminiscent of either the Finger Slayer blade or I said like the Sacred Relic blade. And Killer King, welcome into the stream. Is that the one ship that was left behind after Godfrey left with the Tarnished? That's a really interesting way of putting it. I don't think so, because we see multiple styles of those ships. I think the most common theory is that they could be the depictions of what you see on like the stone steles in the underground rivers and the old dynasties. I guess I could pull up a picture. Ship. Nope. Boat? I don't remember what I labeled it. Stele? Okay. I just didn't label it. Just Stele is good enough. Yeah, so some people think the boats that you can see in the blue flower field are like these things. Which, I think that's a cool possibility, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's wrong either. The guy in the vid I'm watching sounds so unenthusiastic, I'm sorry. And hey Aiden, how's it going? And Blue Scientist, welcome in. You think there'll be a new aspect of the Crucible incantations for different types of Crucible beasts? I am really excited about that, so hopefully we get into the Crucible portion of this video pretty soon.
Each weapon could have more unique Ashes of War and individual movesets while maintaining the curved sword archetype of having two weapons at once. This moveset is incredibly similar to the Grave Wardens, not the Duelists of Elden Ring, but the curved sword-wielding Hollows in Dark Souls 3. In one of the final shots, we get to see a dueling shield, as many have pointed out in the community. It's possible that it'll have different functions when held in different hands, though that's purely speculation. We also see a Tarnished holding the dueling shield alongside a twin blade. It isn't confirmation that they'll power stance together, it's very possible that they won't, but the choice to have them together, and the fact that they both have blades on both ends, makes me think it's possible that they'll work in tandem somehow.
That would actually be super cool if you could power stance them. FromSoft has included things like that, although they're extremely uncommon. If anybody doesn't know this, you can technically power stance the wakizashi with any katana, because a wakizashi is essentially like a tiny katana, but not really. So that's just like a little bit of a flavor thing that I enjoy. So I doubt this will work that way, but it's definitely a cool idea, and it'd be cool if they upplayed that stuff a little bit more. Like Lords of the Fallen was kind of like that now that I think about it. You don't see any of the golden effects that make the Crucible spells obvious, like in the Porcupine spell? Well, in the Porcupine spell, when you look at it, when the Hippo does it, it seems to shoot out a bunch of orangey stars a la Elden stars. So I do think there's more of a connection. But we obviously haven't seen how the Tarnished utilizes that spell, other than in like the promotional artwork.
I'd put this in the Crucible section, but it's not really part of any theory, so I think it's better suited here. The final shot of fan service we get is, of course, the iconic Crucible Knight wing attack. Somehow I didn't process it at first, but the Tarnished isn't holding any seal. This pretty much confirms to me that the wings are going to be an Ash of War, which makes sense, making them applicable specifically to swords and bladed weapons. This does make me worried though, as Ordovis and Siluria's weapons already have unique ashes. This means it's possible we won't be able to use the wings on the actual Crucible Knight weapons. Then again, it's always possible that it could be similar to Golden Vow, which functions as both an Ash of War and a spell. Now that we're over some of the most spectacular parts of the trailer, let's move on to places that I'm purely speculating about rather than having a solid amount of confidence in my claims. This section starts with this odd place that looks like where the Jar Warriors may be forged and delivered. We know that the warriors are tasked with carrying their insides to minor Erdtrees to be absorbed, hence why they're always around the minor Erdtrees in the base game. But with this land, there may not be any minor Erdtrees around. So, what are these jars here for? Are Jar Warriors born in the first place? Could the jars be used for something else, like transporting the sap that drips from the tree?
Oh, that's a really interesting idea. Because, I mean, yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, you could make the argument that the stuff within the living jars is essentially sap before it becomes a part of the tree. Or, I mean, it will eventually go on to become sap and amber, essentially. But, no, I really like that idea. So, damn it, now I forgot what I was going to say about the living jars beyond that. Oh, yeah. In 1.0, there was one description which said that the living jars were experiments and attempts at trying to create immortality. And then it got changed, so I don't know how canon it's ultimately supposed to be, but I thought it was a neat idea. Oh, and these could be used for platforming? That'd be wild. Methoda says these pots are high poly. They have the technology. Yeah, but these pots are a lot bigger, so yeah, I don't know. We could rebuild Alexander. We have the technology.
Alternatively, they could serve an opposite purpose. The pots may simply serve as burial pots, holding the dead as their final resting place. Moving on to a different area, let's focus on this lava room for a moment. I have three suggestions.
Hold on. Damn it, YouTube. I saw a frame.
Area. Let's focus on this lava room.
Oh, no, it must have just been YouTube having issues. I thought like there was like a funny editing mistake.
For a moment. I have three suggestions for this place specifically. One could be related to the last area, being the actual forge of the Jar Warriors. Two, this is the only time we see an area like this, and the lava sort of reminds me of the lava in some late-game heroes' graves, meaning our little side dungeons could have new gimmicks and spectacles. Or three, it could be the inner layer of Messmer's location, maybe some sort of lava fortress. As I'll discuss later on, Messmer does seem to have ties to Rykard in some way, and this place definitely feels straight out of Volcano Manor. Taking a few steps back, let's focus in on this shot I mentioned earlier, with the two individuals fighting, one in samurai armor, the other in a red dress. In the background, we can see a field of glowing blue flowers. It doesn't look like any other location in the trailer, and as we get this panning shot of it, we can see there's a couple of large tombstones across the place, similar to the ones we can find in Altus Plateau, on the path towards Lanedale. They can also be found in the Morn Moan grave. They're unique in that they have a hole within them, with fingerprint markings around the hole. It's difficult for me to piece together exactly what they mean, but I don't think it should be entirely discounted because of how rarely this asset is used. Could it be possible that they indicate the influence of the fingers, literally making a hole in death in its symbols? Perhaps the power granted to the fingers and their holding back of death is a literal violation of vandalism of these graves.
So I don't know the true facts behind this matter, but I've heard that tombstones which have holes in them, like, are done so that way they don't get toppled over by the wind, and that could have been a consideration, especially because of the size of these ones. It seems like there would be a lot more surface area in which the wind could like potentially blow it down if it didn't have anywhere to go. So I don't know like how true that is, but that's just something that I've heard and I'm relaying here. And yeah, as Nectarine points out, this gravestone was also used in Dark Souls 3. Actually, I don't know if the big ones were in Dark Souls 3. I know that they're definitely cut content for the God's Grave area, but I don't recall if these specifically were used elsewhere. It's a reference to the Dark Souls 2 giants? Yeah. Drake figured these are just the trolls' graves, but that doesn't really make sense anymore. I mean, that's a good idea, because, I mean, like, why else would there be such a big headstone? But yeah.
One aspect of this DLC that is very apparent is how littered it is with symbolisms for and against the Crucible. For example, let's look at that castle from the beginning of the trailer, and I want to draw attention to the top part of the fortress, which seems to be crumbling against gravity. It's somewhat reminiscent of Fara Mazula to me, with its floating rocks, which may be tied to a character we see later on. All of that essentially implies that this is a place where more primordial forces still reign. The ancient beasts of Fara Mazula may have come from here, In this shot with the swords being held backwards, the Tarnished is attacking some strange creatures with elongated necks and bodies, sprouting omen horns. They're the first time we see omen with this kind of body type. The horns aren't just sprouting from regular humans, but from many other creatures. In its hand is a candle, already making it somewhat heretical to the Erdtree, with fire being profane.
Seems to be more of a YouTube issue. I haven't dropped any frames. My internet seems, stably terrible there. But anyway, Disillusioned Dork, nice to see you again. Thank you so much for the 20 pounds. I appreciate that. I'm doing pretty well this fine 3:30 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Just wanted to ask if I'm aware Charred Thermos came back and re-uploaded his Agony of Effort series on Bloodborne. You're hyped to see my thoughts on his series? I heard about that. I haven't seen it. But yeah, maybe I should add those videos back to the list if he's okay with it, fine with it, yeah. And yeah, welcome back to stream. Nice to have you. What was I gonna say about the candles? Oh yeah. So, I don't know how heretical candles really are in the grand scheme of things, because I'm trying to recall like how many other places candles show up in the base game. The ones that stand out to me the most are what I call like the pseudo Helfen style candle trees in the Halig Tree region, because they're like statuettes or candle stands, lamps. I don't know what you call them. But I feel like in many other places there are a lot of glintstone sources of light rather than firelight or candles. So he might kind of be inadvertently onto something here. I don't recall a lot of lit candles, but I feel like I've seen like candlesticks or candelabras that just haven't been active. But I might be misremembering. This is actually kind of intriguing, and I might want to like go back and look for that stuff. You wonder if that candelabra is a candle tree? It's really weird because this thing does really remind me a lot of the pseudo impaled dude, where he has like the sap looking amber type stuff like going through his body. Like when I first saw the trailer, I legitimately thought the candlesticks here were like recreations of that dude. I thought this could have been his skull, but then like once I zoomed in, I was like, oh no, that's not like his skull, or not his skull, but a skull. It's just a thing. No, I definitely remembered you. You were devastated when Chard deleted his stuff out of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, I can understand like a lot of the pressure that comes with having a YouTube channel. So I'm glad he's in a better state then, for real. Hey, Cole Dash, welcome on in. So I'm really bad at remembering names, but I believe this is Most Denier. I almost called him Morton Nyer. This is Most Denier's video here. Or Most Nyer? I don't know how to pronounce it. And Methoda says, it's not like the normal fire could hurt the Erdtree, though. Radagon soldiers used a lot of fire stuff. Well, we're told that fire was banned previously, and it became used more during the Shattering.
We can see the candle's shape elsewhere in the trailer. Specifically, we see the shape
this dude
on our freaky painting man, suggesting that he's similarly Crucible related. The thing embedded within him that he's pulling out is weird, to say the least. It's like a tree's branches, or more specifically, the legs of a centipede. If you take note of the black knife, which is a corrupted blade of calling, you'll see that it's sprouted extra centipede leg-esque branches.
Alright, I don't like those comparisons until we have like more examples of swords like actually literally sprouting appendages. I feel like this is just a little bit of a poetic, artistic liberty here, but anyway. Yeah, I was also going to say, I don't necessarily think the old dude's stuff looks like centipede legs either, but anyway. Blue Scientist doesn't see it either, yeah. Alright, let's get out of full screen.
I think it's possible that this man was impaled.
Come on, YouTube.
By a regular spear initially, and the weapon piercing through him was corrupted, growing into a similar shape. After all, it doesn't seem possible that this man could have been pierced by this object as it is, especially with the large branches on the side.
Okay, so I could respect that rationale for like this thing specifically, but also this thing doesn't look completely inorganic in the same way that metal does. This almost seems like crystallized honey or something along those lines. So it seems like it could have come from something organic originally. So the idea that it grew these things later is a very interesting idea that I like. An inverted Christmas tree. What presents do you think you'd get from this dude, Killer King? And Disillusioned Dork says the same thing. Christmas and Hanukkah. Koi Pop, welcome back in. The channel's going through the Black Knife's blade. The channels going through the Black Knife's blade mirror the centipede wounds they inflict. You can see where he's getting the comparison. Okay, yeah, if you want to like make that comparison, I think you can. I just would kind of disagree that like the metal itself grew spikes. All right, I'm gonna go to theater mode apparently. Shaman Lee.
Especially with the large branches.
YouTube's so weird, bro.
There's a few other interesting Crucible bits lightly touched on or briefly shown in the trailer. For example, I believe this connection between the Crucible and death, as potentially indicated by the sprouting black knife and the weapon embedded into Painting Man, is demonstrated again with this
I'm in pain.
Hippo-like creature. After charging at the player, it sprouts thorns with what looks like an aerial attack. It even fires out some kind of projectile that I presume could rain down on the player, similar.
I almost feel like I need to download all this crap beforehand because YouTube is just failing me on the live service front. And this shouldn't be an internet issue. But yeah, I don't know. This pretty much only happens when I stream though. So maybe there's something with OBS. No idea. Try 360. I mean, if you guys are comfortable with it, we could definitely lower it. I'll go back to auto.
To Elden Beast's wing projectile spears attack.
You think that looks like the 7-branched sword?
The sound it makes.
I've thought about that, but I don't know if anyone's like actually brought it up.
Confirms that it's a crucible spell, and we can see that we can cast the same thing in website screenshots. More notably, though, the thorns feel reminiscent of the thorns that sprout from the player when inflicted by Deathblight.
I feel like that's a huge stretch. I mean, I can get it, but these things are like bug wings. But if you're going to say they're reminiscent, sure, but I feel like the kind of impression that they're trying to give off is a little bit strong for me.
To mention that the creature's color scheme already reflects Deathblight, being black and yellow. This, alongside the parallels between the Crucible candles, the Black Knives, and the Painting Man's strange condition, make me think that death as a whole serves as an opposite to the Crucible. It makes sense, after all, that the spread of death would be in opposition to uncontrolled primordial life. I think that this lion boss is going to be a major part of this area, since the color and the look of its arena seems to match quite well. What's very, very notable is that this lion is not a lion. It is a Chinese lion dance.
Nah, it's lion. Lyin. Haha, got him.
It is so subtle in the shots they gave that I did not put it together until someone else mentioned it. You can see the head is being propped up by humanoid hands in every shot. The foot that slams down in this shot is just like Morgoth's Omen foot. The way they stand up is extremely similar to how lion dancers stand up, propping up on each other to simulate the lion standing on its hind legs. You can actually see them under the cloak during their breath attack, and you can see that the bottom legs don't follow the head perfectly, instead moving first to control the movement of the dance.
Just absolute 10 out of 10 enemy design right here for me. I don't know why, I just absolutely love it. Scally's has been saying it's a Chinese parade dragon from day one. For real, same here. You thought it was pretty apparent? It's pretty easy to miss if you're just taking a casual look. I noticed it specifically the second time I was watching the trailer because I wanted to look at the mouth a bit more, and then I saw the hand push it up, and I was like, oh, and then I put 2 and 2 together. So cool for real though.
In its lightning attack, it is clear that the lion head doesn't seem to be participating or matching with the lightning jump, meaning one of the dancers inside is the one casting the lightning. While still on the topic of lions, this lion head is more than just...
Let me think about that a bit more. It's not that I disagree, I'm just wondering if there's any other examples of enemies, not just in Elden Ring, but FromSoft games where spells seem to be used in different parts of its limbs. That sounds kind of stupid because a lot of the enemies in FromSoft games are bipedal and only have 2 arms. So a multi-segmented enemy that casts things from a non-dominant position, I guess. But yeah, maybe there's not a lot of that at all. Not that that really matters because this is obviously 2 to 3 to 4 to 12 dudes stacked on top of each other. So who knows? Yeah, it still does bother me quite a bit that this is yellow lightning, and I am super curious to find out more about everything relating to this. America sent China to the Shadow Realm.
First of all, it's a beast, like the lion guardians we find across the game, and much like Sarash. It's definitely linked to Farum Azula in some way, with the lightning incantations of one of its riders, and its bestial breath being reminiscent of Malekith. But much more interestingly, statues in some shots show lions with its horns. This is a place where the Crucible is still considered a blessing rather than being reviled, and I think that's what this city is entirely. A place wild and free from the systematic slaughter of the Omen in the lands between.
To be fair, he did set up this section by saying he thought that this was speculation, which is perfectly fine. As to whether or not the Crucible is reviled here, obviously we don't really know yet. I don't know how I feel about it, just because I could potentially see cases being made for the fact that they could be reviled or beat up on, depending on whether or not Messmer's forces are fighting these dudes, or a number of other factors at play. Part 7, Fire and Blood.
I thought this thing to be a major story boss, but upon seeing the attached website screenshots, this thing seems to be escorted by soldiers, similarly to the giant carriages in the base game. This makes me think that they may be some sort of recurring boss. We very clearly fight them in the open world. It's got briars on its wrists, like the briars of the fire monks, and it's the most straight-up fiery-looking thing in the trailer. In an interview, Miyazaki states that the golem, quote, was a terrible weapon used in a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow. This leads me to think that it might be Messmer's flame specifically, which, as we'll discuss...
Didn't Miyazaki say the dude's name in the interview, and it was Ted or something? So that's just to think of the Wicker Man just being named some generic thing like Ted is just really funny to me. I don't remember the exact name, but it's my headcanon. That's what his name is going to be. I think so.
Discuss at the end of this.
Mitchell, thank you.
Multiple sources. It also should be noted that the kindling inside of it is not charcoal, but bodies. One part of this bizarre golem's design might even look familiar, hanging from its leg. It's a little hard to see, but just below its belt of branches is the head of a fire giant. And like many other things in the trailer, the central face of this monster is decorated with omen horns. It's a very cool design.
I remember hearing the fire giant head being pointed out to me a long time ago, but I kind of forgot about it. I want to almost say that like helps inform a bit of the timeline, but really it kind of doesn't either. So it seems like you could say that the Shadowlands may have been disconnected sometime after the war against the fire giants, but we also have the possibility of some fire giants existing in this location, tucked away from the world, but yeah, we don't know.
Likely inspired by myths like the Wicker Man with its caged torso. It is strange how many times different groups of worship and factions seem to intertwine in this DLC. The Briars and the Crucible aren't something I'd normally put together, and yet, just as Messmer's design later on shows, the Heretical seems to merge together, just as the Golden Order did with the Sorcerers of Rea Lucaria. In the shot with the giant throwing pot, we can see these enemies, who appear to be wearing some sort of big iron masks. They seem to be the same ones escorting the Wicker Man. They look almost like they're wearing the Prisoner starting class mask, which was created to stifle and torment its wearer. More notably, a central plate is in the center of the middle enemy's chest piece, which parallels the Eye of the Fell God that sits within the giant's chests. The shields of the men flanking him are circles surrounded by 8 other small shapes, which very closely resemble the 8 circles that surround the Eye of the Fell God in the Fire Giant cutscene. These seem to be survivors of the old war the Wicker Man was used in, likely worshippers of the Fell Flame. They could be seen as akin to the Fire Monks, though while those monks seem more associated with blood in Briars, as is the Wicker Man, these soldiers seem more focused on the fire of the giants. They're definitely tied in some way, given the presence of the fire monks in the mountaintops, though what links them is yet to be seen. But I think a certain character may shed light on that.
So yeah, comparing the Wicker Man to Blood and Fire is interesting, and not something I would have necessarily thought of myself, because when I see the Wicker Man, I just think fire. But yeah, I guess with like all the human and extra human sacrifices within it, there might be a really big component of blood within it. Now I'm just like imagining what would happen if like all of the blood of the sacrifices in the Wicker Man thing crystallized into like super red glintstone. Just like how much glintstone that thing could possibly contain. That's just like a super cool idea for like an artificed enemy or something like that. The combination of him in a big field screamed fertilization into Hilko's mind. Fertilization how? Like it's fertilizing crops, it's like dropping stuff? I figured out the second phase. Oh no. It's gonna shoot freaking fire lasers at us. And Eladelia, welcome on into the stream.
Wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so bereft of light?
Messmer is a character that is already full of so many questions. His design feels like it takes a little from everything. The easiest thing to note is that his name starts with an M, and he has red hair, making him a child of Marika and Radagon, which is probably the only obvious thing about him. He has snakes on him, red snakes, which immediately ties him to Rykard, the Volcano Manor, and the Inquisition. His visual language shows that he is in opposition to the Erdtree. Much like the Nameless King, his weapon seems to be some sort of sword spear, and take note of the golden hilt.
So, one issue that I have with these kind of recurring connections between characters is that visual stuff isn't always indicative of like what the character is fully about. Because just to like draw an arbitrary parallel example here, if we were to compare Mohg to Morgott, you could say, oh look, they're both omens. That means they're like fully affiliated with each other or related to each other, which I mean they are. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, the path that Mohg went down is a little bit different than Morgott's, and so I don't know how fair it is to just always draw such conclusions from the visuals alone, which isn't to say that we shouldn't pay attention to them, but I do think it's important to stay a little bit guarded with jumping to such conclusions at times. And yeah, as Blue Scientist said, you're still not convinced he's Ratigan's son. It does really pique my curiosity that Miyazaki neither confirmed nor denied the demigod status of Messmer, which makes me think there's a possibility he could predate all of the demigod children or have been a potential suitor to Marika at one point. I really don't have strong feelings about that. Those are just some of the ideas which have sprung into mind. And Galamoth disagrees with the Marika Ratigan child angle as well. Yushun, welcome on in. It's not the best comparison because their visuals are pretty different. I mean, can you also say the same thing about like Messmer to Rykard or any of the other stuff though? And Roy says he does call someone who can make someone a lord mother. You are not wrong there. And just to like, bring a little bit of a curse into the chat. If Marika's okay with self-cest, ... You
can see that this golden hilt very closely resembles Mohg's spear, with its golden, almost semicircle-like shape, down to the additional adornments of gold that jut out from its surface. Also like Mohg's spear, the blade is black. This implies the fire he wields may not just be destined death, but other kinds of fire, such as blood flame. A weird discrepancy, though, is that Messmer's spear looks completely different in the key art, where there seems to be a second semicircle embedded within its ornamentation. This spear in this...
So I would need to double check the trailer footage, but Messmer does have an attack where a bunch of spears pop up out of the ground, or like he shoots them and they land on the ground, one of the two. And maybe these types of spears can show up with that attack. But obviously this is more or less just like me coping right now. But yeah, this is a pretty interesting discrepancy. That is something I've noticed as well. I just didn't really have this in my head. Like I knew like the double... used... Why is W a letter? Because now I can't say the W design. Anyway, the inverted U's here are kind of shown elsewhere in the collector's edition box, like on the backside of it, not with like Messmer's seal, but the one that's used in his boss fight is, more standardized. And anyway, that's not too important. What's going on with the end of his snake tail? Well, you see, during the fight with Messmer, you'll need to grab it to open him up to enemy attacks, but that's only effective if you're doing co-op. And you better hope your cooperator doesn't comet Azure you into death as well. And then Doug Robertson, welcome into the stream.
This artwork in particular is almost one-to-one with Tattoo 28 in the character creation menu, which hasn't been given an in-game counterpart or connection yet whatsoever.
Alright, so I may as well unleash the other cursed lore thought that I had the other day into stream. I posted this on the Discord. Damn, I'm not going to find it. Let me look up the art book. I'm a little bit blind. I really need to go back and like label all this stuff so that way I can find things immediately. Oh, it's so dark. That's why I couldn't see it. All right. We've got a very interesting shape. I guess this doesn't really match like the Messmer thing that was shown right here. Remind me towards the end of the video if he doesn't show off like the box art stuff to like go back to this. But the TLDR is that I've wondered whether or not this design on this noble's blanket, whatever you want to call it, could correspond to whatever we'll see in the DLC. Now, I don't necessarily think that's meant to be like significant. It's just a lingering thought. Right. Mia Jepson, nice to see you again. It's going pretty well. How about you? The snakes like the gladiators wear in Rykard must mean something. Maybe, yeah. But if they all connect into Messmer, we don't know. I didn't bring this up on yesterday's stream, but I have harped on the idea quite a bit that snakes weren't necessarily traitors to the Erdtree as much as they were rebellious towards it. And I always make the comparison of how the Imperial Republic the Imperial Empire in Star Wars might feel that the rebels are rebelling against them, but are still ultimately part of the Empire. But you wouldn't necessarily call those the rebels traitors unless you're probably on the Empire side. But the rebels would probably have never felt like traitors because they never agreed to such a system. So that's kind of my thoughts on like what's going on with the snakes for now, at least.
It's strange that only the artwork seems to line up with this, indicating that it's either cut content or some sort of art discrepancy. Turning back to the flame that Messmer wields, though they are black and red, tendrils or branches seem to grow out of it, more reminiscent of the visuals of Deathblight. Though the fire attacks we see later do have that black and red, the attack explodes in what looks more akin to regular fiery magma, and a brighter color that could be seen as blood flame.
I was muted. Okay. So, I was saying, hold on. Let's double check everything in the VLC, and I was just kind of like rambling while I was stalling for time. So it does look like the spears in the concept art do exist, but they're just part of his secondary attack thing, rather than his like main spear, I guess. But he might pull a Mihune from Soul Eater and just like start picking up these spears and beating the hell out of us with them. That'd be so cool. Alright, let's close this and open this.
This makes me think that it's some twisted imitation of Destined Death, making use of something like Blood Flame and Deathblight, or possibly the Giant's Flame or Rykard's Taker's Flames. It could also relate to the Blood Star mentioned in the Thorn Sorceries, which we know are related to the Fire Monks. In a voice line, Messmer refers to...
How do you guys feel about that idea? I think I'd be more on board with it if we saw like more root type stuff coming out of these fiery attacks, but since I haven't seen that quite yet, I remain a bit skeptical.
A mother, asking her if she would truly grant lordship to one bereft of light. I think this sounds like some sort of jealous cry against the Tarnish. If he were cast out and removed from history, to a point where we never hear of him at all until the Shadowland ourselves, why would she allow mere Tarnished to become lords? Alternatively, the line could be referring to himself, pondering whether one as heretical as himself could truly become a lord.
So one thing that's also worth noting, this hand just always looks weird. Maybe it's the angle, because like all the fingers look the same size as the thumb, or vice versa. Anyway, he's got like these long claws, which are kind of the exact same looking nails that you'll find on the lion dancers, which might be related to the Omen, potentially. So now I'm kind of wondering if whatever's going on with Messmer could have had a tie-in into the Omen beyond the whole blood flame connection. So maybe there's like some curse going on with him or something. I don't know. Killer King asks, does Rykard's flames also have some dark in them? Not exactly. They tend to be more hex-based, so they have like spirits of the dead, which are tormented. So if you want to say like that's black aligned, maybe, but visually, no. They tend to be more like magma based, which we've seen Messmer's attacks being a little bit more like magma as well. Doug says, if Messmer was banished to the Shadowlands for burning the Erdtree, as some have speculated, it makes sense that he'd be the source of the Thorn sorceries. And that could certainly help explain like why the guilty were guilty of something, because it's all left very vague. We're told about like the whole cardinal sin and everything like that. So beyond that, if we want to go into the whole like why does the Wicker Man have the fire giant's head on its belt area, we could say that the thorns that pierced the fire giants could all be connected to this stuff, and like maybe that's where that connection comes from. So it's kind of fun to draw these connections, but it'll be even more fun to see if they pan out. Link to the creepy hand enemies. So it's just the lion dancers. Like if you see at the very beginning when he closes the mouth, you can see that the nails look pretty much the same. I can pull up the screenshot if we really want, or not screenshot, but the video if we really want. There's no good spot to get your nails done in the Lands of Shadow. I mean, that stuff looks pretty well. Is it? I don't know the difference between a manicure and a pedicure. Isn't pedicure for feet? Mani for manus man. Okay, yeah. Never mind. I figured it out. And other than like the weird ass ridges, I mean, they looked pretty well groomed. Maybe it's all natural.
There are two additional things about him that only make him more confusing. One, he's participating in dragon communion of some sort. That much is clear. He has one very clear, very yellow reptilian eye. His armor is essentially that of the Drake Knights, minus the omen horns. He has the exact same chain with a red cloak above it, and dragon wings that don't just emerge from his armor.
Yeah, that chainmail is completely different, actually, and it's more reminiscent of Godfrey's, but that's, like, not too important. And his red draped cloak and whatnot is not made out of, like, wings and whatnot. Rob asks, do we know anything about the hand enemies? Are you asking about the finger crawlers specifically, or things that have hands similar to Messmer? Because I guess really it doesn't matter, because the answer is kind of like no for both. We know a tiny bit about the finger creepers, but that's about it.
Armor, but seem to actively grow. You can see in this shot that the wings literally grow from one of the snakes.
All right, so that was definitely an editing error that I saw there. We had a cut to the little amber pierced guy.
You can see in this.
Well, what's the forward? All right, period.
Shot.
This shot. All right, no, maybe. Okay. So we got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah, a decent amount of frames. So I felt like I've had like a little bit of these issues throughout the video, and I couldn't tell if it was just YouTube being freaking YouTube or if it was something going on with the video. So a little bit of advice for most Insider here is to just go back, double check your video before you publish it for a little bit of errors like these. And also like balance the sound sometimes when transitioning into the game sound, because those have been like really abrupt and jarring as well if you watch this after the fact. Can I check if this is this person's first video or not? It doesn't seem to be. So they don't seem to upload. Oh no, that's the For You. I freaking hate the For You section now. 10 videos. Okay. So yeah, they don't have like a lot of stuff. It's not that big a deal, but you know, if I'm like reacting to it and giving people feedback, I'm just trying to be as constructive as I can. Hey, true connoisseur, welcome on in. Tinfoil hat theory is that you don't actually believe is that Messmer is the child of Placidusax in America. It's kind of funny because I think it was Kent who said something earlier about that at the very beginning of stream, except he had a typo. So he was saying that Messmer was happy god, happy dragon instead of half god, half dragon that we were giving him crap for. But yeah, that is a possibility. I have floated the possibility in the past that Messmer, Messmer could be, sorry, not Messmer, America could be affiliated with Farum Azula and could have potentially been the god that fled Placidusax. especially because if Malekith was the beast clergyman of Farum Azula and Marika is older than Malekith, just like how the hell did he become the beast clergyman of such a civilization? Why is he a shadowbound beast? All that manner of thing, and just a lot of the oddities between the architectural styles of Leyndell and Farum Azula really gets the gears turning there, because we've got like the Chloranthy style design showing up there, and also in the DLC trailer with the Lion Dancer fight. Hey Jonah, nice to see you again. No work tonight and the dogs have been thoroughly walked. You can give your undivided attention to the stream. Nice. Yeah, so it was really hot here today, and I neglected playing with my dogs as much as I did today because I was trying to do some stuff in Destiny, and I took a brief amount of time to play a lot of fetch with the puppy before stream, and since it was still pretty hot, he is nicely tuckered out now. So yeah, I definitely feel the struggle there.
To literally grow from one of the snakes. It's very possible that he's mid-transformation, and that the wings and the snakes aren't mere accessories or pets, but actually a part of his body, much like Gwendolyn's serpents. Strangely, the only things from the Drake Knight set that are absent on Messmer's body are the omen horns. So he's tied somehow to Dragon Communion, to Volcano Manor, to Deathblight, to Bloodflame, all while almost certainly being a sibling to Miquella and Melania. And yet, despite all of this, he addresses Marika, his mother, with what feels like reverence, and stands in front of what has effectively been confirmed as a statue of her.
Yeah, and so like that idea of revering Marika is very strange to me if he is like truly a usurper, as he's kind of been portrayed as so far, with like everyone burning in the flames of Messmer. And I think like Miyazaki said something in an interview like how, anyway, I don't remember the particulars, so I won't like go into that. Rob feels like we're still going to be so lost after the DLC, and we're all here for it. Okay, so stuff like that are the audio examples that I'm speaking of, where it just like juts in so loud. One way to avoid that, it's so weird because it seemed to like balance out after the fact, but you could do an audio like fade in transition, and that would like alleviate a lot of these problems. Or I don't know why it's like coming out like that.
Of the race of gold, shadow, death.
And Gallimah thinks this line could be spiteful or sarcastic. I could see that.
In a later voice line,
but it's the vibes are just very strange to me.
he says that those who are stripped of grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame. This is the second confusing thing. His imagery is all heretical, in opposition to the Erdtree and to the Golden Order. And yet the line he says sounds almost like it's from a worshipper, from a loyal follower, if you will.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I floated this idea publicly, but it wouldn't surprise me if like the Crucible, how it was originally ordained as like a holy thing and became disdained over time. I feel like the same principle might apply to Messmer here, where we have like all those surreptitious prophecies of cardinal sin in fire and flame in the Erdtree. So Messmer and or his abilities may have been integral to like burning the Erdtree at one point, but once Marika and Radigan and or Godfrey, or insert your headcanon here, did what they needed to do, they didn't necessarily need to burn the Erdtree anymore and were probably comfortable getting rid of whatever may have threatened it, and they may have just like banished Messmer for everyone's own good, so that way they never had to worry about that again. But I don't know how true that is. It seems like it's something that could be wonderfully on brand for the game, though. I don't know how you guys feel.
This has many potential meanings. Perhaps he is not willingly in the state he is now, merely bearing all of these different heretical states in flames for the sake of holding them back. Perhaps he is a mere tool of Marika who serves as a jailer, perhaps needing all of that power to keep Miquella contained. The idea that Messmer could be a tool for Marika is supported by one of the most easily missed things about him: his eye. His left eye appears to be sealed shut, a very familiar sight. Melina and Ranni are both split, souls without true bodies. Both have their left eye shut. To note, Ranni's spirit face mirrors the doll she inhabits. My assumption is that the true shut eye is the left one. While I think they could be indicators of their disembodied nature, it feels more likely to me that they seal some sort of secret. Messmer, being bodiless, doesn't appear to match up to the fact that we can, well, fight. I think Messmer's closed eye is hiding something about him, like how Melina hides her connection to destined death, and how Ranni's betrays her role in the Night of the Black Knives, the shape of Godwin's wound manifesting below her eye.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody make that claim. Is that like the centipede? I don't think so. Let me pull up an actual like screenshot of Ranni. Yeah, no, definitely not. I mean, I could kind of see it if you want to see it, but I don't really think so. I feel like that's just kind of wishful thinking, unfortunately. Although it really would be cool if it was, though. Maybe if it's like corrupted. But I mean, yeah. Okay. Do you think he means the other eye? Which other eye? So Jonah was asking, if Malekith is Marika's shadow, they'd have to be about the same age, right? Is there anything known about how the shadows are actually created? Not exactly. We're told that the shadows were given to Empyrean specifically when they're chosen, and that's pretty much it. We were told that Blythe was gifted to Ranni when she was like still a child, but we don't know what exactly like constitutes the age of like children in Elden Ring. Obviously like newly borns would, still be children, but with like demigods and whatnot existing for eons was like Ranni when she was like 40 still like essentially a child in comparison to like how old she is now. Does child encompass like somebody like up to like their teens or 20s? I don't really know how relevant it is, but at the very least, it was really early in Ranni's life. I think we could comfortably say there. And then Roy asks, aren't Miquella and Melania Empyreans? Where are their shadows? That is something that I've wondered for a long time. I have wondered whether or not Melania is kind of effectively Miquella's shadow to some extent, but yeah, we really don't have any clue, which has bothered me for a while. And same thing with Marika. I know some people think that the two fingers in the round table hold could be her fingers. But I don't know, because like Malekith can still show up in the Bestial Sanctum even after the two fingers in the round table hold. I guess they're not technically dead. They're just immobile as though they're dead. Question mark? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just going to leave that there. Ponyboy, nice to see you. You think her eye marking would be more obvious if it was meant to be the death brand? It just looks like frost pulling out? Yeah. Or pooling out. Okay, I gotcha. And Jonah thinks that Blythe grew up with them. Yeah, that's kind of the vibe that I get, but I'm just trying to like be like, as conscientious as I can about it, because time is convoluted in Elden Ring, to borrow a line from Dark Souls 1. Is there Japanese text for Ranni's age to get Blythe? I mean, I'm pretty confident EG just says it's like when they're children, but I don't know what exactly that means for Elden Ring. So it could just be that straightforward, but, everything be messed up. True Connoisseur says, the fled god being Marika answers some things, but raises difficult timeline questions. You've usually thought the ancient dynasty with their little boat and Newman arrival carvings came after Fair Missoula. I feel like they would have come beforehand, personally, because, well, it depends on what you mean by Fair Missoula. I can imagine them, like, coming, you know, like, coexisting alongside each other, essentially, or at the very least, independently from each other. But I feel like the Ul and Erd dynasty are extremely ancient because of like the Claymen, and with all of the nomadic people kind of like settling in those ruins and eschewing metalwork, it leads me to believe that the Ul and Erd dynasties were also not users of metal, which is an interesting contrast into the way that the denizens of Fair Missoula did use like gold work and metal work in their jewelry as well as their equipment. So with beasts possessing knowledge beyond human ken, it is questionable whether or not like the beasts could have actually had metal before like, you know, normal people had metal. It's perfectly arguable there, but I don't know. There just seems like the style of the buildings in the Ul and Erd dynasties seem to be architecturally more ancient than Farum Azula, and that just goes back into the question of, well, if the beasts had knowledge beyond human ken, could that account for the differences? But I don't really know, because when you look at Farum Azula, we do have the exact same designs which show up in Lane Dell with the Chloranthy symbol, which maybe I should show it, but it's not that big a deal right now. There's also like statues of humans, which seem to be like more modern humans than like the old dudes, but that's kind of like, you know, wishy-washy and pretty weak arguments, I feel. So yeah, hopefully you can work with that. I don't know what else to say about it. Koi Pop says, Fair Missoula feels like the dawn of civilization. I don't necessarily think so. And oh yeah, I don't think I didn't say it right now, but some of the statues in Fair Missoula are reused from like Bloodborne and whatnot, which isn't a big deal. So you have a statue of Charlemagne and the Virgin Mary, and that statue also appears in Raya Lucaria. So I don't know if it's just like dev oversight or if it's like lore stuff, but Farum Azula feels, architecturally speaking, more recent to me than the Ul and Erd dynasties. But that doesn't mean the dragons didn't rule throughout the existence of the Ul and Erd dynasties. Yeah, Tony just brought it up too, thank you. Oh no, I'm not trying to say just because they're reused they don't have relevance. I'm just saying that, like, at the very least, we know they weren't tailor-made for this game, so just, you know, try to be a little bit more skeptical, because they might just be more generic overall in their placement, I guess.
Shape of Godwin's wound manifesting below her eye. My theory, given the abundance of more niche schools of magic and beings unrelated to the Golden Order, is that this is a realm free of the Erdtree's influence, and grace in general. I initially thought that Miquella conceived the world, but Miyazaki, in an interview, said the following.
So before we get into that interview, I don't know how I feel about this, because we're told that, I mean, we're not just told, like, we see a version of the Erdtree, but I guess it is a good question to ask if it was the recipient of its grace or benediction or whatever you want to call it, its blessings. I don't know, because obviously my current opinions of the Crucible, for those who are familiar with the channel, is that the Crucible is the Erdtree. I don't want to like get on that soapbox again just right now, but if you accept that premise, then the fact that we get Crucible incantations showing up in the Shadowlands and whatnot suggests that the Erdtree did have some form of influence there. To also build off that stuff, if Messmer is knowledgeable enough to remark that we lack grace, it would imply that either he has grace or others within the Shadowlands also had grace to some extent at some point. But yeah. Okay.
Other axis of the story is Queen Marika and what she did in the Land of Shadow, and what led Miquella to follow her there. It is a primordial world, occupied by those who were here before, but were still rejected when the lands between as we know them came into the power of the Golden Order. As we know, Marika came to this land, and it was where she became a god, and specifically where the Erdtree was born. I believe this is where a dark truth lies. We see omen, we see beasts, we see gravity sorcery, we see the fell flame, and many others that are not primarily adjacent to the teachings of the Golden Order that are tied to the Erdtree.
Thinking about the gravity aspect specifically, it is possible there could be like independent discoveries in the Shadowlands, which is something that I'm kind of a strong proponent for. But if you don't believe that for whatever reason, I guess we could also compare it to like, when did normal folk within the lands between begin to get gravity sorceries? We know Radahn learned from an Alabaster Lord, and they're ancient, which is, its own thing, but was Radahn the first? I don't necessarily think so, but if you do think like that's kind of like the biggest introduction of gravity sorcery to like the common folk or like the humanoids, then that might be compelling to say that maybe the Shadowlands got dislodged later in the timeline rather than earlier, if there's this kind of other form of gravity magic at play here. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but yeah. Galamoth asks, am I a Great Tree believer? I don't have to get into it if I don't feel like it. So it's complicated, as is everything in Elden Ring. So now that you got me on this soapbox tangent, let me pull up my handy dandy resource for the Great Tree specifically. So this is all the instances in which the term Great Tree gets used in both English and Japanese here. Great Tree will be highlighted in orange, and its corresponding stuff in English will also be orange, and Erdtree will be gold. So was there one contradiction? Okay, yeah. So in the Tree and Beast Surcoat, it's essentially called the Great Tree and Beast Surcoat here, and it says that it depicts the distant Erdtree and the Beast Regent, and it's very explicit in the Japanese that the Great Tree and Beast Surcoat depicts the distant Erdtree, which I think is a pretty clear indicator that it's talking about like the big Erdtree of Leyndell most specifically. And when just looking at the English alone, we're told that on the night of the dire plot, the stolen rune of death enabled the first death of a demigod. Later, the rune of death spread across the lands between through the underground roots of the Great Tree, sprouting in the form of Deathroot. But when we compare this to the Prince of Death's pustule, it is said that this pustule came from the visage of the Prince of Death, he who used to be called Godwin. As first dead of the demigods, it said he's buried deep under the capital at the Erdtree's roots. Now, obviously, Root Resin talks about how the roots of the Great Tree were once linked to the Erdtree, or so they say, and it's for that reason that catacombs are built around Great Tree roots. But this makes it explicit that the Great Tree is the Erdtree, and my opinion is that the Erdtree referenced here is the big one in Leyndell, so great roots go into the Erdtree. Not necessarily great tree roots, or hold on, not great tree roots, great, tree roots might be another way to read this. So, right. Beyond that, we do have some more explicit indications that the Erdtree is called the Great Tree in other times. So this is Dee's dialogue in Summonwater Village. He says, your soul will return to the Erdtree in time in English, but the Japanese here is Great Tree. So, one day your soul will most likely, probably, etc., return to the Great Tree. And then the same thing in the Altus Plateau, Leyndell outskirts Finger Reader dialogue, where she says, surely you see it too, the gold that enshrouds the heavens, the Great Tree which begets the pillars of light. So within context, you could tell that this is obviously a reference to the big Erdtree and all that. So my opinion is that the Great Tree is a reference to the Erdtree explicitly, but with all of that being said, that doesn't disclude the possibility that another gigantic tree could have existed before the Erdtree. So that should answer your question. To be fair, Morlor, I did not get on my soapbox about like the Crucible stuff. I talked about the Great Tree here. John Spence, welcome on in. He says the Taiju comes off as being said in reverence of just the Erdtree. Yes. Are you familiar with Japanese by any chance? Since you actually like use the kanji and whatnot, because it's always nice to have more people to like bounce translations and stuff off of. N1, damn, you're probably better than me. Yeah. So yeah, if you want to talk more translation stuff, I highly recommend joining the Discord, which is linked up here at the top of the stream. And yeah, if you ever want to like contradict me or corroborate what I say, I fully encourage it. I always look for like other people to like falsify what I say or, correct me if I'm wrong at times, because I'm human, stuff happens. So yeah, definitely be cool. You're just trying to trigger me, Morlor. That's bait.
Messmer is a child of Merica and Radagon, and he seems like he was cast out, removed from the annals of history, much like the Nameless King was. He carries the aesthetics of multiple things, all of which are heretical to the Golden Order in some way. Though I can't place his exact role in the story, I think he'll represent the Shadowlands as a whole. A place cast aside and hidden from the rest of the lands between by a veil, a place cast aside after its usefulness was outlived, a place that Merica didn't want remembered. The Crucible and death feel interlinked in some way, and it's the Crucible that seems to be appearing throughout. In the money shot, you can actually see that there are two trees that overlook the Land of Shadows, with one tree being squeezed by the other, draining sap into a tower at its base. This sap is discussed in the Blessed Dew Talisman. And yet, contrary to the talisman's descriptions, it seems that sap still drips from the central tree. It's possible that this tree is the real Erdtree, a tree hidden away for whatever reason and replaced with, you guessed it, an illusion. Look closely at these two trees. They're black, lacking in many leaves. Could they be burnt? Look around Lanedale before we even burn the Erdtree. Why does ash already cover so much of its ground? Consider the name given to this world, the Land of Shadow they call it. Perhaps it functions as a shadow-bound beast does, a world confined and bound out of its own control, existing for specific purposes. I think it's very possible that someone burnt this old Erdtree, sending ash across Lanedale and setting the stage for the Golden Order. And given how we have a brand new character, one associated with every kind of fire deemed heretical, I don't think it'd be a stretch to say that the culprit was Messmer the Impaler. I suggest that Messmer burnt the old Erdtree, and Merica banished him and everything associated with him to the Land of Shadow, deeming the fires he wielded as heretical. Whether Merica had a hand in the burning is up to debate, but given how this was the land where she ascended to godhood, I don't think it'd be much of a stretch. If Merica was capable of using her shadow as a tool, casting Malekith aside after he served his purpose, I don't think it'd be far off to suggest she'd do the same to an entire realm of shadow. I suggest that Messmer's heretical imagery was not always seen as that way, and that we only see it as such because of the teaching we've already been shown throughout the game. Teaching spread by the current order. This is not a solid theory. We have to consider when Messmer was born, being a child of Radagon. We have to consider when Radagon came about, whether he was always part of Merica or what kind of world Godfrey ruled in. But it's my theory, nonetheless. So with this theory in mind, what is Miquella's role in all this?
All right, so I appreciate like the perspectives here. I don't know how I feel about Messmer burning the Erdtree necessarily at the beginning of like Marika and Godfrey's reign, which I don't remember if he said it this way explicitly, but he may have inadvertently implied it. That's the vibe that I got. Is that how you guys feel about it in chat too? Am I like misinterpreting it? Did I get distracted? All that stuff. So anyway, the point that I want to build on, whether or not Messmer burned the Erdtree, and if he burned the Erdtree, that is responsible for like the Ash's appearance in Leyndell. Part of my reservations with going along with that theory is due to the damn it, this is a mistake. All right, I guess I'll just go back here. Okay. Part of my reservation comes with, let me pull up some Leyndell photos, with just kind of how Leyndell looks as far as the Ash is concerned. I should have like taken like better pictures of all the Ash, since this has kind of been a recurring topic apparently. All right, I maybe footage is better. Give me a second. Leyndell Vant. All right, so I'm just gonna like start pulling up clips at random that might not really be too great, so just bear with me here. Well, my stuff keeps loading rather. I know that's the wrong form of Leyndell. That's actually Ash and Leyndell. All right, so that's not enough Ash. Let me give you City Pan. This would probably be a good one. All right, so if the Ash came from the Erdtree burning originally, then I think we run into the issue of like how much of Leyndell was already built before the Erdtree burned and or existed, because this would mean like all of this stuff existed, which is perfectly fine, but I think it's pretty abundant that what I call the upper portion of Leyndell seems more recent for a variety of reasons, especially compared to like lower Leyndell. So this stuff is like all furnished with like gold shingles or whatnot, and anyway, all of these like statues bear Erdtree imagery. Like a lot of the furniture has Erdtree imagery. I don't necessarily think the outsides do. Well, some of them do. Like by the elevator, you get Erdtrees depicted on it. The Erdtree Sanctuary certainly has Erdtree stuff depicted on it, but we have Ash everywhere. Maybe you could make the argument that the Ash got blown around over time, but this could be like a video game explanation, but if so, that it does bother me that we don't have like more Ash outside of Leyndell. But anyway, that's like not too important. I just want to focus on whether or not, like when in the timeline that would have happened. So let me look back at chat to see if you guys are thinking that he was implying that it would have happened earlier rather than later in the timeline. Well, no, he said he would have been the child of Marika and Radigan. So I guess it really comes down to the question of like when he thinks Messmer was born. If he thinks Messmer was still Marika and Radigan's before like the Godfrey stuff. I guess like, yeah, these are like some of the more difficult things of trying to like piece everything together, because to me it seems like if you believe one thing, you really need to account for all of the other scenarios which go into either like supporting that theory or detracting from it. So does that make sense to you guys in chat? Am I like actually articulating this? Because I feel like I'm just like dancing around it, but I can't find the words to say what I want to say about it. All right, sounds right so far. Galamoth still likes theorizing. You're just not taking any solid stances. And Scalisi had the brilliant comment that he's honestly kind of tired of trying to predict how From's DLCs will go, and you're finding it hard to muster the effort to solidly believe anything until after it's released. Yeah, even after it's released, still doubt it. You haven't heard a good alternate theory, but the Ash felt off as being an earlier burning. Is there another explanation? You could potentially... So I think it's possible that the Erdtree may have been burned between the transition of Godfrey and Radigan. That wasn't necessarily like the actual shattering. I don't necessarily like it. Another theory is that this stuff could have been from when Grand Sax attacked, which I think, can make a lot of sense for a variety of reasons. Some essentially believe that the ash is Gransack's dandruff, just like stuff from its scales over time, but I don't know. True Connoisseur says, the Ashen Lane Dell doesn't seem like it came from early in Marika's reign. The layout suggests it came later on. Oh yeah, and then the other thing is like all of these buildings up here are not scorched whatsoever, whereas down in Lower Lane Dell, they're like, you know, covered with smoke and soot and ash, and especially the fortified manor. I should probably change our thing here. So yeah, down in Lower Lane Dell, you've got red roofs, a lot more ash down here, whereas you get the gold stuff like the higher you go. And all right, I'll try to look for a better angle. So this isn't a very good vision of the lower part. Nightfire, what the hell is that? Oh, okay. I've got too much footage, bro. So maybe I'll like get more footage or screenshots of ash specifically. This is the upper portion of Lane Dell. So that isn't to say like there shouldn't be any ash in the upper portion, because there still is. It's just like these buildings seem newer, which it's still annoying that there's all this ash up here. If no matter how you try to put things in the timeline, whether it happened early or later, in some ways like the shattering idea makes sense for like all this ash, but it's just really annoying to me for a variety of reasons. All right, I'm just gonna look up fortified manor. Oh, this isn't the best angle. Oh well, anyway, if you look at the fortified manor, you can see like it's got like charred damage. This isn't the best angle. So this is a little bit better where you can see it. Yeah. All right, hopefully I've made that point clear enough. Let's get rid of this. Okay. Yeah, True Connoisseur says, you thought the most likely explanation was that it was a side effect of the original shattering. So, like I said, that kind of makes sense for the ash, but it also doesn't help explain like the pseudo burn scorch marks in places like the fortified manor, unfortunately. Scaleezy says, just watch, Messmer was born before America became a god. You say it every stream because you want the credit for it if you're right. I've got too much footage, bro. I'll record more. What I mean by that is I'll record more and actually like label it differently so I can find it. Because when I just like look up Lane Dell, it's true that I have too much footage, but I don't have it labeled because I wasn't necessarily paying attention about ash back then. Oh yeah, Galamoth brings up a good point that there were a bunch of fire catapults in the trailer, so maybe that stuff could be a product of the Shattering War rather than the what's called the event of like the Erdtree being shattered with the ring, I guess. That is a good point actually, because there is some damage to Lane Dell which could potentially corroborate that, because it's not like a ton of ash. But then why is there so much more ash specifically around the fortified manor then is my question. Hey D and Dehydrate, welcome on in. You're gonna hit my Nightbot. Could it really just be the remnants of the big battle that happened in Lane Dell? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I feel like there's probably just not a satisfactory answer, which sucks. You think the ash is left in a remembrance kind of way, like a UNESCO site? Oof. All right, let's go back to the last bit of this video here. And thanks for all the comments and whatnot. I appreciate it.
And all this. One of the first new armor sets we see is this one. And as a friend pointed out, this looks like it could be a Miquella Knight set. The combination of silver and gold colors reflect the Miquella Knight's sword, and similarly to that sword, it seems that it appropriates the aesthetics of the Carians, where gold and silver are combined alongside precious stones within.
So about that, I don't know how I feel about it because let me just pull up the actual text. The Miquella Knight's sword says that it never like had an owner. Although I guess maybe you could argue that it's that sword specifically rather than this style of sword. Maybe I just kind of like zoned out a bit and missed the point that he was making and might just be going off on too pedantic of a tangent. But anyway, yeah, let's make this bigger for the screen. Alright. A sumptuous piece, yet has never been offered to any knight. An ill-starred sword with no master. Okay, so I guess it's vague and could be this sword specifically, rather than any Miquella Knight sword. That's not how I would read it myself, to be honest, but, you know, we have that room for doubt, which I'm fine with.
The blades and armor. The ring that this Miquella Knight stands over could be the Ring of Miquella, a gesture you get from pre-ordering the game, and as a friend suggested, could serve as the DLC's version of Sights of Grace. Miquella, in the ending of the trailer, stands before the trees, the top part white and colorless, like in the Duskborn ending, while the baldachins that draped over the land are gone. I think that Miquella is either responsible for draining the sap from the tree, or, more likely in my eyes, he is seeking to free it from this process. It is possible that this is what keeps the Golden Order in its perpetual state of idle power, and that this is what Miquella is trying to break with our help. Or perhaps it is what prevents the eclipse, and what prevents Godwin from dying a true death, being a source of deathblight. It could be all of these options. It could be that the veil hangs over this tree, and the other tree that strangles it keeps it in stasis. Perhaps it's maintaining a status quo. The same status quo throughout the lands between. If Miquella is removing the baldachin like I suspect he is, he could possibly be trying to do for the tree what he plans to do for Godwin. Perhaps Miquella's goal is to give this Erdtree a true death, to break stasis and to allow life to progress, freeing the many schools of heresy from the Shadowland and releasing them into the world. And to do that, of course, he needs our help. I think that the feminine voice we hear at the end is his, or perhaps Saint Trina's, guiding us to him, to help him achieve this goal. I genuinely don't believe Miquella's intentions to be malicious, despite how cold and calculating I expect him to be. As we follow in his footsteps, he'll be using us to achieve this goal, to allow everything to flourish, be it graceful or malign.
Come now, touch the withered arm, and travel to the realm of shadow. I will not be far behind. May we meet again.
So that looks like pretty much the end of the video. I'm going to go ahead and like it and share it with you guys in the chat if you want to give Most and I some more support. It's always nice and encouraged. So yeah, obviously while I did have some pretty strong disagreements at times, I did appreciate a lot of the observations that Most and I brought forth in their video, and I did genuinely like it. So yeah, okay. Let's see if he has anything left here at the end before I go back to chat. Oh yeah, I just remembered that I was supposed to like look up the sigil on the at the very end of the trailer for the Fia looking like thing. So before I forget about that, Shadow of. Not quite here. Okay. So yeah, I don't think it's like a super good match, but I've wondered whether or not this thing is supposed to be similar to what we see on like the blanket Fia has in her like little artwork on the intro. Not the biggest of deals, but, you know, just a passing thought. So, True Connoisseur also brought up a good point a moment back, in that the Capital of Ash effect, when you burn the Erdtree, suggests that the Ash in the current version, or like the base form of Leyndell, may have been linked to an Erdtree related event. So yeah, that's a very good point to bring up as well. And I kind of feel similarly. It's just always a bit of a mess trying to figure out when that happens. I do think it would most likely have to happen after like the Erdtree was already around for a significant portion of time, and for like Leyndell to have been built up. And maybe it affected like lower Leyndell, and then the upper Leyndell portion came after. I don't know. Just because like if upper Leyndell came after, why the hell is there all that ash other than like the whole UNESCO heritage site explanation? And Jonah says, you think keeping the word, that using the word shadow in Shadow of the Erdtree has to be double entendre? Do you have a specific idea of the entendre that you'd like to share? Because I think I mentioned this on stream yesterday, but I don't know how well it works out. Actually, let's go look at it now. Because as far as Gwendolyn is concerned, what would he be called? What game would it be? What item should I look at? Dark Souls 1? Gwendoline. Oh, God. Okay, Dark Sun. Oh, no, so this is... No, that's Dark Moon. Hold on. Kage no Taiyo. Kage? Shaded. What's Shadow of the Erdtree? Japanese title. Ogonju no Kage. Oh, so it's a different form of Kage. Because, you know, Japanese doesn't have one form of Kage. So, let's do this for you guys. Oh, yeah. So, in the Brass Helm, it talks about Dark Sun Gwendolyn. So, this version of Kage is, like, it means shade. How does the other Kage not mean shade, though? I mean, it does. Trying to really break down the differences in Japanese is a real pain in the ass sometimes. So, whereas this version of Kage also means shadow. I'm trying to remember the exact nuance here. Let's pull up the G-Show for the old good reference here. Because I feel like this means it in the sense of shadow, silhouette. Isn't this like more related to the sun and dusk? I meant to do G-Show. Anyway. Yeah, I was afraid of this. Yin. Okay. Okay. So yeah, with it being associated with yin, that's definitely more like the sun darkness sense rather than like shade of light being cast on an object sense. And the other form of Kage for Shadow of the Erdtree is the one where it's like there's an object that casts a shadow, whereas the one with Gwendolyn is different. So okay, that idea doesn't fully work out like I thought, which I thought it didn't work out because I figured I would have remembered it more if it did. So that makes sense there. So sorry for that little tangent. Has the tree with the 9 dots / eggs on the collector's edition been discussed much? What tree are you talking about? I'm unfamiliar with that. Shadow the Hedgehog? Oh no. Then we're going to have lots of damn Elden Rings if that Shadow of the Erdtree ever gets hit. Yushun asks, what if Upper Leyndell was simply cleaned by Morgott and his knights? So, if that all happened post-shattering, it's a little bit strange to me because we're told like how many nobles were like driven out of Leyndell as a result of the shattering. So to me, it seems like most of the workers and stuff may have been like forced to leave, and all you really have are like military personnel, a few commoners which are like all dejected, and like perfumers to treat them. But I mean, you might be right. It just, I don't know, just nothing ever really seems to like fully work in my mind with all that. You don't know what I said? I don't remember what I said at this point anymore. Does he call the tree in the Shadowlands the Shadow Tree? Yes. In Japanese, yes. The original collector's edition? Oh, okay, so you're talking about the symbol on Millennia's cape. So yeah, okay, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, so I think that's just like a heavily stylized form of the Halig tree. Let's, I don't know if I have a good picture of her cape, so I'm just gonna look it up here. Why is this so tiny? Okay, yeah, so this thing. Okay, with the 9 dots. I see what you're saying now. Yeah, it's associated with Millennia and or Miquella. That's pretty much all I can say. Good question, though. Oh, okay, yeah, now I remember. Thank you, Pony. I asked you, Jonah, what you thought the double entendre was, if you had an idea. And then Ponyboy asks, could that double entendre be in relation to the Empyrean Shadow somehow? I've wondered that as well. I think I mentioned that in my last video about the Grace of Old and whatnot. So, okay. So yeah, that was a pretty good video. I did like a lot of those observations. So we're probably going to go over time reacting to this next video by Ontos or Ontos. I actually don't know how to pronounce his name. I should ask him. And see where that goes. So I'm not sure if this is directly related to the DLC. I think this is the most recent one he suggested I watch. But anyway, let's go ahead and check out Elden Ring's Metaphysics, Duality and Non-Duality by Ontos. So, okay. Let's go ahead and dive on in.
Why does a cigarette smoke never go back into the cigarette? Why do the molecules spread away from each other? Why does a spilled drop of ink never reform? Because the universe moves towards a state of dissipation. That is the principle of entropy, the tendency of the universe to evolve towards a state of increasing disorder. The principle of entropy is related to the era of time, a result of the expansion in the universe. But what will happen when the gravitational forces counterbalances the force of expansion? Or if the energy of the quantum void proves too weak? At that moment, the universe might enter its phase of contraction, the Big Crunch.
The Gnab Gib.
So what will become of time? Will it reverse? No one knows the answer.
Oh, the music's a little bit loud here. I was gonna say I kind of liked the silly, almost Visual K-esque first track there. Oh god. Let me know if I need to turn it down for you guys. I did it on my end.
Referring to
Good
Tolkien
6
Lord of the
a.m.
Rings
music, you're not
in terms of
complaining.
conceptual differences, whereas the One Ring is something that actually physically exists and fits your hand, the Elden Ring is more of an abstraction.
Alright, now I'm a little bit scared to turn the volume back up on my end.
It is a representation of something metaphysical. Some of you might say it is not possible to understand the complete structure of a game like Elden Ring in a single episode.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
It is a complex subject.
All right, let's go ahead and dislike this video now. He called us all stupid bastards.
So let's not beat around the bush and ask the important question. What exactly is metaphysics, and consequently the definition of the Elden Ring?
Another martini, Paul.
Although glintstone sorcery is seen as a magician's path over mastering the stars, it is an avenue of research that, if embodied well, something called the primeval current is directly experienced.
It should not be forgotten that glintstone sorcery is the study of the stars and the life therein.
Azur's and Luzat's glintstone crowns are a manifestation of what happens when you take the spiritual path. Gold.
Every time it bothers me that Azur is not the blue dude. Anyway.
Mask is a student of within a cosmic perspective. See, the dynamic for Gold Mask is the same with Buddhism. He is focusing on daily meditation and contemplation to slowly embody the truth and spiritual wisdom. A tested and proven technique of spiritual growth where you literally have faith in the process. The progress is slow, but understanding occurs on a deeper level when you have a breakthrough. Worn rags that just barely cover the body. Lord Goldmask felt no draw to the vain access of clothing. What use is finery to one who seeks greater brilliance?
So this is kind of like one of the weird things to Goldmask that I think is pretty easy to overlook and miss, in that because he is a kind of fundamentalist adherent of the Golden Order, that makes many people believe that Goldmask is more essentially like faith aligned, whereas I would almost argue the opposite, and whereas I feel like he's more of like a mathematician in a certain degree because he focuses on scholarship and understanding, and he actually goes so far as to see beyond the dogmatic faith of the hunters, and he chooses to seek true enlightenment, which coincidentally does become like faith-based with the way that the Golden Order has layered the understanding of the fundament of order into the Elden Ring. So I think he is like a syncretization of both faith and intelligence understanding, but he sees beyond the faith and it kind of like actually understands it, is kind of like the vibe that I get. So comparing him to Buddhism and trying to say like it's kind of like more faith-based isn't entirely wrong, but I think it is a little bit more nuanced than that. Doggo doesn't agree with that at all. Yeah, would you go ahead and elaborate? And Mia says he's more philosopher than prophet. Maybe, yeah, that might be a really good way to describe it, now that you mention it. Oh, Jonah thinks that Shadow of the Erdtree could be an official title that can be possessed, like how Elden Lord is a title. That's really interesting. I like that quite a bit. I mean, obviously don't know how well that works, but thematically, that's fun, yeah.
Whereas the dynamic for Carians, like Azur and Luzat, is the same as the psychedelic movement, which was popularized in mid-1960s, where the era was defined by the proliferation of LSD and psychedelic substances in the West. As Selen says, to become a sorcerer first, you must face your ignorance. The progress of such a spiritual path is fast, profound, and instantly rewarding, but its benefits are short-lived. As Luzat and Azur also had experienced, your self-perception and consciousness is deeply and intensely shattered, and you become one with the universe, with the stars, leaving no remnant of your human life behind. People who use psychedelics seriously as a spiritual path report a sense of interconnectedness with their environments, and no longer feeling like a separate self looking at the world, and no longer experiencing suffering. They claim to, at least temporarily, transcend the illusion of self and other, and as Azur would probably agree, step into being one with the primeval current. However,
so obviously, like, that isn't everyone's experiences with those psychedelic drugs, so I felt like that's kind of a relevant disclaimer. Maybe he said it, maybe I spaced out, but anyway, moving on, past that, Doggo said that Gold Mask is a religious ascetic, and he was dogmatic for the Order before Radagon, which represents the inclusion of intelligence into the faith base of the Order as it existed. I don't necessarily know that we could say that Gold Mask and his dogmatic belief would have preceded Radagon and the inclusion of intelligence into that order. Obviously, I am of the opinion that the Golden Order starts with Radagon more specifically, but setting all that stuff aside, I think we could come to the agreement that with Goldmask being an Golden Order fundamentalist, that fundamentalism is probably like a post-Radagon thing. So I think it still works in my cosmology here that Goldmask as a fundamentalist is kind of like more philosopher than prophet, as was said in the chat just a moment ago. And yeah, True Connoisseur says that Goldmask strikes him as very Thomas Aquinas-like in his attempt to document the order of the universe and put everything in its right place. Scream, bleed, die, rot. Welcome into the stream. You respectfully disagree. Ooh, could you elaborate? Because I'm not sure if you're disagreeing with me or like somebody in chat, and I'd be interested to stoke the flames of this discussion. Doggo says, Gold Mask is a tarnished who is banished from the lands between and divested of grace. That seems to line up with Radagon coming into the picture. Nonetheless, I mean, we're told that he's a fundamentalist. Maybe that's a Japanese only thing. I'm pretty sure it's in English. Okay, yeah, you know. The Radiant Gold Mask. Come on, bro. There we go. The Radiant Gold Mask says, it's a mask designed to resemble a blazing golden halo, created and left behind by Lord Goldmask, a staunch pursuer of Golden Order fundamentalism. So maybe I'm misunderstanding your point here. I feel like there's probably just a little bit of a miscommunication, and I understand that it can be a little bit difficult trying to like succinctly make your point, especially within the time span of like me talking out loud versus like typing things into the chat. So like don't feel pressured if it's not working, and if you just like want to start numbering messages so that way I know you're continuing, that's perfectly fine too, and then I could address them all like later in a big chunk. Alright, Scream, Bleed, Die, Rot. Very well. Eladelia says, Goldmask seems to be evidence that the Golden Order fundamentalism probably predated Radagon's ascension. And you're saying that because he is tarnished, that's why it would be the case? I can understand that. However, I also think that the tarnished, not all of the tarnished were people who originally left the lands between, potentially depending on how you feel about characters like Nefeli Lu. So could Goldmask have been a descendant of some sort, not like a full-on person who was literally exiled from the lands between? Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty good form of pushback nonetheless. Alright, gonna go back to the video for now.
There are various shortcomings to this approach. Even though you're blasted with deep spiritual truths, you rarely can embody them in a sustainable and healthy manner. Azur and Luzad is unable to speak and have an actual life. They have completely rejected their humanity to become one with the stars and embody the truth. Similar to the people who consume psychedelics every day without doing deep inner work to embody those insights. An approach that Buddhism and Goldmask would not agree with in the slightest. As nebulous a concept it may look, the primeval current is the nature of stars, and considering both Sun and the Moon to represent the Golden Order's Erdtree and the Carrion's Age of Stars respectively, studying cosmology is extremely valuable. As the Amber Starlight states, if the stars command our fates, then amber-hued stars must command the fates of the gods. The primeval current makes it obvious why Radagon was so eager to learn more about the Carrion sorcery in his marriage with Rennala. As a thought-provoking individual himself, Radagon was aware of the importance of the primeval current, which was a source of the golden star that Elden Beast utilized to arrive on the lands between. Scientists agree that gold was brought to Earth by a meteor shower. Its origin may lie in the explosion of a supernova or the collision of two neutron stars. Not just the Ember Starlight is intimately connected with the fate of Miquella and Melania, but so is the star's Radon was ordered to cease its movements by the Golden Order, which prevents Ranni from killing her two fingers and defying the Golden Order and defying the Greater Will. Fate of the gods are intimately linked with the movements of the stars. Although astrology in the real world might give the impression that the universe is deterministic, in the world of Elden Ring, and I would argue in real life as well, it's not completely deterministic. Stars can be conquered and influenced. Coming back to Miyazaki's quote, using
I do wish that he would elaborate here specifically why he doesn't think like reality is deterministic. Not that I necessarily agree or disagree. I'm just curious to see why he comes to that conclusion. Maybe he'll talk about that now. But anyway, wanted to address some more things in the chat. Ella Delia said, Gold Mask seems to be evidence that Golden Order fundamentalism probably predated Radagon's ascension. And a lot of that stuff is really contingent upon the order in which Godfrey and Radagon switched roles. So when we look at Muriel's dialogue, we're told that that Godfrey was hounded from the lands between when Radagon returned to Leyndell. So in a certain sense, you could say that before Godfrey was exiled and the Tarnished went on the Long March, the Golden Order did exist to some capacity. And depending on how you feel about the minor Erdtree Church in Altus Plateau, we have some record of Marika telling people that she intends to study the Golden Order. We don't know if she's saying that before the Golden Order begins or after. And she has her followers falter. So I don't necessarily think there's a contradiction to say that the Golden Order or the ideology couldn't have been around before the Tarnished were fully exiled. But then again, this goes back into the recurring issue that I bring up, in that it's difficult trying to differentiate the religion of the Golden Order versus the Golden Order as the so-called order instantiated by the Elden Ring, which, yeah. Check Rebus off the bingo card. Thank you, Morlor. Appreciate that. And then Scott Leasy said, plot twist, Radagon literally was the embodiment of the Golden Order. Yeah, I've had that idea as well at times, and it gets pretty complicated out here. All right.
Using the law of regression and causality item descriptions, we can say that in the lands between, the concept of ring is a manifestation of the fundamental laws of the universe, the metaphysical fabric of existence that forms the interconnectedness of all phenomena and the non-dual source intrinsic to all things. The Elden Ring that we see with the Golden Order is the Greater Will's manifestation. It is not the end-all be-all. In fact, we see a different ring formation in Farum Azula, a more ancient time when the Rune of Death was still intact and was a part of existence, unlike in Marika's era. These two spells pioneered by...
Oh yeah, I'm sure if Ontos was in the stream, he'd be going crazy about me not reading this stuff out loud. So he says, the Rune of Death was plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation, as can be observed by the twin birds, Farum Azula, in comparison to the Greater Will's Erdtree / Golden Order. So he might have forgotten a word here. For anybody who may not be too familiar with Ontos's timeline and stuff, I don't remember all the details exactly off the top of my head, but it's a bit different than most, in which he says that the Crucible both exists before the Erdtree as well as during the Erdtree, which might be compatible with some of your views in the chat here. But it is worth pointing out that there might be some pretty big discrepancies. So sometimes you kind of just have to let things go to just kind of get at the the greater points presented, rather than always getting tripped up on the details, which I am wont to do. So anyway, both of their Crucible era signs depicted on the left are different. So he thinks this is a Primordial Crucible era, and this is the Erdtree Crucible era with the Erdtree Worship Sigil, and these are different. And so these two are the same, and then this is different. And then this is the Golden Order. The Farum Azula Crucible sign depicts the earliest period in the history of the Lands Between and has the Rune of Death. The Erdtree Crucible era represents only the post-Greater Will's arrival to the Lands Between, not the origin of the Lands Between. So post-Greater Will arrival? Okay, so he thinks the Elden Ring... Wait, what? Okay, yeah, this I was not too familiar with. So he thinks that there was an Elden Ring before the Greater Will arrived to the Lands Between. So I feel like that's going to be a really big sticking point for a lot of people, because many people would believe that the Greater Will was around with the arrival of the Elden Ring in the form of the Elden Beast, in the form of like the Golden Meteor. So I don't know how he differentiates that the Golden Meteor and the Golden the Elden Beast with this. So I'm a little bit at a loss of words here. Anyway, this is why Aeneas says the Greater Will would not allow for the reintegration of Destined Death back into the world when we told her of our aspirations to burn the Erdtree. This is extremely important to understanding the timeline of Elden Ring. Okay, I think I'm starting to get what he's saying here. So maybe he thinks... Oh, okay, I remember a little bit of his stuff. All right, so Ontos thinks that the Twin Birds are to Farum Azula what the Elden Beast is to Leyndell, I guess, for like lack of better terms. So he thinks like the Twin Bird is like a more primitive / different version of the Elden Beast. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys in the chat there. Sorry it took me a minute to recall all that. Throw Some Cheese thinks the Greater Will came here to harness the power of the Elden Ring. Scream, Bleed, Die, Rot, couldn't disagree more. Alright. So, yeah, as far as like the whole thing with the Golden Meteor is concerned, it is technically written as hearsay. I kind of just leave that one lie because it's not something that's worth really arguing about, almost. I mean, it is, but it's just like not worth the effort is kind of my point. So while it is taken for granted that a golden meteor bearing the Elden Beast and the Elden Ring arrived in the Lands Between, it is technically just hearsay. So if you hate that idea, you're perfectly fine to hate it, but I will just mention it because there is the potential that other things could have happened. Yeah. All right. Leaving that alone for now, let's go back into the video. And just a little bit of a advice or like critique for Ontos here is like, I know you really place a lot of value in having all this text on screen, but my recommendation would be either have the text like more directly tie into what you're saying, or like significantly limit the amount of text that you have on screen at once, unless you're like, you know, deliberately trying to overload the viewer with like a bunch of information to like drive home a point. I think that would be an acceptable way to have like this much info, because like if this stuff isn't following the words that you're using in your script, you might miss some people who might not be watching the video directly, because I know it's a pretty common thing for a lot of people to watch you know, YouTube videos or podcasts and whatnot while they're doing like chores or like exercising. So I think it's a pretty smart idea that if you think this stuff really is that important, that you should probably try to verbalize it as much as possible.
A more ancient time when the Rune of Death was still intact and was a part of existence, unlike in Marika's era. These two spells pioneered by Radagon pierce at the core of what this ring represents on a metaphysical level, which makes it clear why these outer gods want a piece of the action for themselves. Mother of Truth didn't accidentally choose Mohg as its avatar, nor did the Rot god Melania. These outer gods, long before the shattering of the Elden Ring, actively desired the same power the greater will enjoyed with Marika as the Erdtree and the fulcrum of the Golden Order. Remember, as the Black Flame ritual states, the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the apostles. It is said that she was an Empyrean chosen by the fingers. An Empyrean is chosen by their own 2 fingers by the greater will to succeed Queen Marika, which means the Gloam-Eyed Queen did not exist prior to Marika's Golden Order. At the beginning of the Golden Order, before the birth of the Erdtree,
let me see the way that he made that attribution again. Because I was just lost in my own thoughts about how I feel like this would contradict his idea of like destined death being related to like the twin bird. But yeah, I'm just going to actually back up a bit further even so I could get my idea back in my head and also pay attention to what he said.
Golden Order. Remember, as the Black Flame ritual states, the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the apostles. It is said that she was an Empyrean chosen by the fingers. An Empyrean is chosen by their own 2 fingers by the greater will to succeed Queen Marika, which means the Gloam-Eyed Queen did not exist prior to Marika's Golden Order.
Let me double check that quote. Yeah, no, so there's nothing directly textually which says it that way. I understand why he would think that, because like Empyreans are chosen to succeed the Order, and I think like Gallery's dialogue might be the closest indication of that, but I feel like, how do I articulate it? It's like drawing a conclusion from having too small of a sample size in many ways. So Ontos might be factually correct that Empyreans are created to succeed Queen Marika, but that might be too myopic of a view, or like too nearsighted of a view, and there might be a broader truth behind that idea. And rather than Empyreans are chosen to succeed Queen Marika, it could just be broader in that Empyreans are chosen to succeed the Vision's vessel, the god of the Elden Ring. So that's kind of what I think most people's working understanding of what Empyreans are, but I feel like Ontos is taken too small of a view for that specifically. And backpedaling a bit, going back to the whole stuff of if the Gloam-Eyed Queen served destined death, and I'm pretty confident, I might be wrong about this, I'm pretty confident Ontos believes that the twin bird is related to destined death and all that stuff. So one could make the argument that the Gloam-Eyed Queen would have been to the twin bird what Marika is to the greater will in Ontos' cosmology here. And again, like, I'm essentially putting words in his mouth. I don't know if that's what he actually believes, but I don't think what he just said following this really makes sense with within his own framework. But to be fair, I don't fully understand it either. And Eladelia says, unless there are multiple active orders in the world, a new god would inherently be a successor to the current one. Actually, that's kind of an interesting thing you bring up in a different way than I think you might be intending here, because we're told in Protection of the Erdtree. Hey guys, I finally remembered it, right? Nope, that's the Baldachin blessing. Okay, Protection of the Erdtree says, in the beginning, everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order, which I find to be very significant, because to me this implies that if the Erdtree did not embody order, then the Elden Ring didn't embody order, at least to the extent that it embodies order now, and it needed to get souped up over time through these countless victories in war. So I don't know if like how well that might tie into Ontos' point here, but I think that's just kind of an interesting thing to consider in tandem with all this stuff so far. And True Connoisseur says, oh, yeah, thank you for bringing this point up, because that's, yeah, okay. For all we know, the Gloam-Eyed Queen was an alternate choice to become a god alongside Marika, and Marika went out. Yeah, and that's probably the most common theory, which doesn't seem to be compatible with Ontos's theories here, so, all right. Let's go back into the video, because I'm kind of like losing track of what he said here.
Fingers by the greater will to succeed Queen Marika, which means the Gloam-Eyed Queen did not exist prior to Marika's Golden Order. At the beginning of the Golden Order, before the birth of the Erdtree, there were no competitors. Marika was the only...
Damn, that text is so fast.
Erdtree, there were no competitors.
Competitors as the Golden Order leadership, not talking about the Fire Giants. Okay? So yeah, I have like really big disagreements with this so far, but I'm going to let him keep talking. Hey, Anticipated, nice to see you again. Appreciate the discourse and the react streams. Maybe if we get the Gloam-Eyed Queen more subs and follows, she'll do a face reveal for us. Maybe. Alright, thanks. Erdtree, I like it.
Marika was...
Oh yeah, and Scott Leasy brings up an interesting pedantic point here, whereas successor implies the next in a line that continues the current order, replacement is probably better for a new order. Maybe. Yeah, I guess I could like double check the Japanese. I don't remember what context we're talking about specifically though, which might make it a bit more difficult.
Was the only fit for the greater will's vision for the world. But if so, the question is, why did Two Fingers even appoint Empyreans to forge a new order by the greater will when Marika will do just fine? Well,
okay, so going back to some of Ontos's ideas here, I'm pretty damn confident he thinks Destined Death is the realm of the Twin Birds, because he says it's the Rune of Death was like related to the Twin Birds in the Fair Missoula Elden Ring, like the Rune of Death was in that ring. And so if the Gloam-Eyed Queen didn't exist before Marika, I feel like his analysis just kind of falls apart, because no matter like how you view like the Golden Order specifically, whether it began with Godfrey and Marika or Radagon and Marika, you can't have the Gloam-Eyed Queen come after the Golden Order, because the Golden Order means Destined Death is removed, and that's just like counter-textual to everything relating to the Gloam-Eyed Queen's defeat and like her followers being adherents of Destined Death. I know I said that like wrong, but you know what I mean. Sharks are older than trees and we haven't even been in the ocean yet? Oh no. The Elden Shark.
The fact that Marika has plotted against the greater will by shadowing the Elden Ring is evidence enough that you can't completely trust or control any particular vessel. Only Marika's flesh and blood can succeed her as the Vision's vessel, so they need to be appointed by the greater...
And that's an unsubstantiated claim. Obviously, while all of the Empyreans that we've seen so far, with an asterisk with like the Gloam-Eyed Queen, while all of the demigods at least are the direct descendants of Marika, we technically do not know if the Gloam-Eyed Queen is related to her in any capacity. So, yeah.
Greater will just in case. Miquella, Malenia, and Ranni are the specified candidates within the lore. However, the Gloam-Eyed Queen, which I'll make a very strong argument to be the former Empyrean status of Melina, also supports the idea. Melina similarly is an offspring of Marika, just as much deserving of the title Empyrean. However, before the events of the game...
Yeah, I don't like that. Like, these are just so many jumps that are unsupported, but are stated so confidently. It just really leaves a bad taste in my mouth, and really actually makes me unironically dislike this video, just because like not everybody is as familiar with the text of the game to recognize that these are opinions rather than things supported directly by the game. So while certainly there might be the possibility that Melina could have been an Empyrean, you could also argue then why doesn't Ranni include Melina in her list of Empyreans? And of course somebody would be like, oh, well, that's because like Ranni is Melina. But I mean, you know, just like taking things at face value here and not trying to 4D chess. Marika is Radagon, is Melina, is Ranni, is Velka, is Gwendolyn, you know. this stuff is pretty unsubstantiated. I don't really have anything else to say about that. Seems too much of an Occam's razor. It's not even an Occam's razor because I don't think it's the simplest solution. I think it's just like factually inaccurate here.
Malekith has defeated the former Gloam-Eyed Queen, and now Melina has a completely different function aiding the Golden Order. Her mother Marika wants her to guide the Tarnished post-Shattering. Since the Empyrean's flesh is subservient to the Greater Will, it is irrelevant who ascends the throne. In Greater Will's eyes, whomever succeeds Queen Marika, they will embody some form of the Erdtree regardless, with only one exception.
Yeah, I don't know about whether they would need to embody the Erdtree and still follow the Greater Will. Maybe with the current set of Empyreans that might be true. And of course he says one exception with Ranni, so maybe I just stepped on his toes a bit here. But anyway, I don't disagree with the idea that I don't think the Greater Will like really cares who succeeds, but I don't know about like the Erdtree stuff specifically. But of course, like that is potentially contradicted by like the Two Fingers explicitly wanting the Golden Order to continue. So that also ties into whether or not one thinks that the Two Fingers are hiding anything or if they're fully truthful to the Tarnished and whatnot specifically. Hey Ontos, nice to see you again. You said the Gloam-Eyed Queen was the former status of Melina, and when Destined Death was plucked from the Golden Order, Destined Death was given to Melina and was appointed as the Gloam-Eyed Queen until defeated by Malekith, that is. No, I understand that position, but you said that it's post-Marika, which is kind of like the sticking point for many people, because if you believe that the Rune of Death was in the Farum Azula Elden Ring, but you don't believe the Rune of Death is in the, you know, as you called it, the post-Erdtree Crucible Elden Ring, then wouldn't the differentiation between those two orders be between what you would call the Twin Bird time and the Elden Beast time? So that chronology just does not match up. Oh, Galamoth said, Melina was kept in a basement tower cell guarded by a Murray executioner. It's weird. I thought at first you were like making a Havel joke, and then yeah, it's all good. Okay, let's go back to the video here.
That is Ranni. She's completely out of the game. She has actively rebelled against the Greater Will by slaying her Two Fingers and shedding her Empyrean flesh. That genetic heritage to Radagon or Marika is absolutely essential, which means Ranni can never be influenced by the Elden Beast anymore. The Age of Stars is maybe the...
Wait. What?
Two Fingers and shedding her Empyrean flesh. That genetic heritage to Radagon or Marika is absolutely essential, which means Ranni can never be influenced by the Elden Beast anymore.
Fudge, I was muted. Thank you, Astanex. So, okay. So, yeah. I had to do a double take because I wasn't sure what you were trying to say, but I think I figured it out. Okay, so what I believe Ontos is trying to say here is rather than Ranni being unrelated to the Greater Will due to the genetics or heredity of Radagon and Marika, I think he was trying to say because she shed her flesh, that's why she's no longer under its control. Although the way it was written didn't necessarily work that way, and I think it was just like the product of a run-on sentence there. So maybe you needed to like reword this, but maybe that is your point. And if you do think Ranni can't be controlled by the Greater Will because of her heredity, I would be extremely skeptical of that claim, because then like how does that tie into Miquella and Melania? So I'm pretty confident you'd be saying it's because she shed her flesh, I suppose. Cameray, welcome on into this stream. Nice to have you here. Okay.
That genetic heritage to Radagon or America is absolutely essential, which means Ranni can never be influenced by the Elden Beast anymore. The Age of Stars is maybe the only time when the Greater Will felt pure terror as the Erdtree of the Golden Order and America as its vision's vessel. They will all perish within the laws of the dark full moon of the Carian lineage. I hope you can see the oppositional dynamic of the moon and the sun, which is an alchemical lore we'll touch base with soon.
So I do wish you expanded on why you felt the Greater Will was terrified of Ranni's Age of Stars, because I felt like if you would have just tied it into the stuff with the Nox who awaited their Lord of the Night or the Stars or whatever it was, that could like help support your point, but you didn't do it, which is a little bit disappointing. But anyway.
The only reason Ranni could even defy her fate like this was her spirit, non-corporeal form attained on the Night of the Black Knives, and with the death of her 2 fingers, due to the hidden treasure of the eternal city of Nokron, a blade said to have been born of a corpse. This blood-drenched fetish is proof of the high treason committed by the eternal city and symbolizes its downfall. Cannot be wielded by those without a fate, meaning only Empyreans can use it, but is said to be able to harm the Greater Will and its vessels, and by vessels, it means Greater Will's 2 fingers. Haven't you ever wondered why we don't see the 2 fingers of Miquella and Melania? Well, that was a bit of a trick question. We actually do see Melania's 2 fingers. The isolated divine tower near Lindell, that's where you go to be able to utilize Melania's great rune. The reason why Ranni's 2 fingers is alive unlike the rest is a special circumstance Ranni had found herself in when Marika shattered the Elden Ring. See, Ranni didn't have a corporeal body to become a shard bearer like her brothers and sisters. The Great Rune was never inherited by Ranni due to her spirit form, meaning, unlike Melania's 2 fingers, the Great Rune is inside the fingers, completely intact, alive and well. In fact, there's one more alive 2 fingers found in the game, just like Ranni's, but this one is in the round table hold.
So I do wish you emphasized like what Great Rune you think that is, if you think it could be related to either the Great Rune of the Unborn, which is probably not your position, but I'm just trying to say it, or if it's an other rune entirely, that might be another thing, but this claim is interesting, but there isn't a lot of game support for it, so this is just kind of like more speculative stuff. And I do wish throughout your videos that you were more consistent about like pointing out what is like directly taken from the game versus your own theories and headcanon here.
The Great Rune is inside the fingers, completely intact, alive and well. In fact, there's one more alive 2 fingers found in the game, just like Ranni's. But this one is in the round table hold, which we know is a location that has an inherent relationship with the Erdtree. And there's one demigod, just like...
No, it's not hold my horses. Like, this has been a consistent issue with like all of your videos so far. They're just all making extremely bold claims when they're not actually supported by the text. And it's perfectly fine to make bold claims not supported by the text, to me, if you make it clear that those are bold claims not supported by the text. But yeah, I'm just like really disappointed in how consistent of an issue this has been over multiple videos. Anyway, so Scully asks, didn't Ranni discard her rune? You think it was Gideon that said that, so he could be wrong, you guess. Of course, opinions about this may differ, but I am of the opinion that even though Gideon professes himself to be all-knowing, he is anything but. And since he most likely doesn't know about Ranni's situation in relation to Godwin, he may have thought she would have inherited a great shard of the Elden Ring just like all of the other demigods, but I don't think she ever did, claim a shard, and I don't really think she participated in the shattering because she kind of cloistered herself away. So it is my opinion that Ranni never had a shard of the Elden Ring asterisk in that she would have discarded along with her flesh. So the asterisk there, I would say, would be if you don't count like the so-called fragment of a rune of death, which she used to imbue like the black knives with their power. But again, that would have also been like a pre-shattering thing. So a different shard of the Elden Ring that is unrelated to like this version of the Elden Ring, I suppose. Morlor asks, you forget, but is there a single moment in the entire game where Gideon is absolutely, irrefutably, factually correct about anything? He's correct about finding the Albinoric woman. Yeah, he does have some like really good information at times. Like he correctly points out to us like the locations of all the demigods, essentially, even if they aren't like as detailed as they possibly could be. Generally speaking, he is fairly reliable, which is one of the things that I also like love and hate about the FromSoft games, where like because people in these games tend to be generally reliable, it tends to make people just like players interpret them as like being reliable, and they just kind of take things at face value rather than being a bit more critical about what they say. So with the exception of Patches, because everyone recognizes Patches as kind of like a caricature rather than like an actual character of the game. But yeah, with withholding Patches, we really need another Yosefka or like what's he called? The not Bloodthirsty Beast. Oh my god. The Suspicious Beggar of like Bloodborne to like really mislead players to like make them more mistrustful of the NPCs again. Galamoth said Gideon got all the names right. High bar to hit. Astanek says Patches is always trusty to him. What's new, boys? Welcome on into the stream. Is Gideon's line about Ranni's great rune hearsay? So the way that I look at hearsay is anything that comes from an NPC is technically going to be secondary information. So what I mean by that is even if that NPC was a first-hand witness account of an event, we don't always know if an NPC is going to tell us the full truth of what happened. They might have an interpretation of events which might not fully align with the history of what happened. And for that, I'll point to an example in like Dark Souls 1 where Ingvard tells us what he believes happened to like the Abyss and the legend of Artorias. So he kind of tells us about Artorias's exploits down in the Abyss. But when we talk to Alvina, was this an issue in English? I think there was like some localization stuff, but as far as the Japanese goes, there's no contradiction in what Alvina says to us. And she says that what actually happened with Artorias is a bit of a lie, but they kind of just like went along with it to keep people from like trying to plunder his grave, essentially, I think. So anyway, yeah, I just kind of lost my train of thought. All good questions, though. Oh yeah, so like the stuff with the hearsay. So yeah, I look at NPC dialogue is inherently suspect, but I will treat all item descriptions which don't use suppositional language as like actually correct until proven otherwise, because I haven't found a full-on contradiction in the game yet, other than like gameplay mechanics versus lore mechanics, which hasn't been explained through like the lens of hearsay. So one example of this, to give like a concrete one, let me just pull up the actual text, so that way it doesn't seem like I'm just referring to some random event here. Would be Sir Alan in Dark Souls 2. Maybe it's the armor set. Alan. One minute. Scrolling. Oh wait, was that his set? Okay. So, Leggings worn by Sir Alan, who served the old Iron King. Sir Alan came to this land from the east, chose to serve a little-known and unestablished lord, and helped him become the old Iron King. Then, at the very peak of his sire's rule, Sir Alan set out again in search of lands yet unknown. So this makes it sound like Alan just did his own thing, but if you go back into the past in Dark Souls 2, you can go and fight Alan and kill him to get this armor set. And the final lines here, Toyu, or the final characters here, Toyu means like it said that he searched for like lands yet, he searched for new lands, essentially. So this in English seems like what's contradicted by the events of the game, but it's not actually a contradiction, at least as far as like the Japanese is concerned, because it does use hearsay to soften the events of the game. All right, so hopefully we're on the same page.
Like Ranni, who was in a spirit form, yet was appointed by the Two Fingers as an Empyrean. Similarly, the Great Rune could never be inherited by her, rendering her Two Fingers alive and well. Of course I'm talking about...
All right, I'm going to back up again so you could make that point, because I felt like that was another jump, but that could have just been because I, was in like halfway through his sentence there.
Intact, alive and well. In fact, there's one more alive Two Fingers found in the game, just like Ranni's, but this one is in the Round Table Hold, which we know is a location that has an inherent relationship with the Erdtree. And there's one demigod, just like Ranni, who was in a spirit form, yet was appointed by the Two Fingers as an Empyrean. Similarly, the Great Rune could never be inherited by her, rendering her Two Fingers alive and well. Of course I'm talking about Melina, someone we know who has been born at the foot of the Erdtree and has been making countless insinuations in the game about how she can govern her movements now that we brought her to the Lindell capital. Those Two Fingers in the Round Table Hold are similarly alive and well because Melina could not inherit the shard in her spirit form, which means if Ranni wants to defy the Greater Will, she needs to use the Fingerslayer Blade to destroy her part of the Great Rune, which is sustained by the metaphysical link residing inside her Two Fingers. This is why we bring those Great Runes to the Dead Fingers in the first place. After America shattered the Elden Ring, the Great Runes links to the Two Fingers were broken. They were dead. Their powers were now directly sourced into America's demigods, tainting each of them with their strength.
So I've got a lot of issues with this, but I will also say that I like the idea, even if I don't like really believe it, that the reason that Ranni's Two Fingers are alive and potentially the Two Fingers and the Round Table Hold are alive is because Ranni and Melina are like both spectral beings. They're both spirits. So I don't know how Ontos feels about like the Two Fingers so-called pseudo death in the Round Table Hold after the Rune of Death is it's before the Rune of Death is unleashed, after the Flame of Ruin is unleashed, or Melina double dies. Yeah, I don't know how he feels about that yet, but it's an interesting idea. I disagree with all the stuff about like the runes in them so far, just because there isn't enough evidence for it, which doesn't mean that it's not true. It's just like I can't prove a negative. So anyway, yeah, I have really strong suspicions that a lot of this is not going to make sense in terms of if Ontos will suggest that the Rune of Death is held in the Two Fingers at the Round Table Hold, but I am jumping ahead a bit because I don't know what other rune he would be referring to, and maybe it doesn't need to be part of the Elden Ring, and I have no idea how he's going to tie in the idea that like destroying these runes somehow would affect the Greater Will and its connection to the Elden Ring. So, trying to like figure that out in my head right now. Hey Jan Purko, welcome into the stream. Gideon, the approximately well-informed. Fair enough, yeah. If nothing else, it's a fun new take. True story.
And when we bring the great runes we retrieved from the demigods back into the two fingers, we revive a portion of their power for our use as a tarnished. Keep in mind that the complete revival of these fingers are impossible unless we mend the Elden Ring, which can only happen at the end of the game with Marika. She's the Vision's vessel and the actual nexus of the broken parts. What we do in the game, bringing these great runes back into the dead fingers, allow us to get a little taste of the significantly limited power of the shards.
So, I thought of an idea, and I feel like this is one of the principal cases of like working backwards from a conclusion rather than having like pieces of evidence to support an idea. So the thought that just came to mind right now was, okay, Ranni and Melina are like in spirit form. That's perfectly fine and well. Melina is still alive, but her fingers are dead. So by Ontos's logic here, if we somehow burned... Did I say Melina? I meant Melania. If we somehow burned Melania, would her two fingers suddenly spring to life? Like, this stuff just doesn't quite add up for me in a number of different directions. So anyway. Hey, Okiman. Nice to see you again. Welcome in.
After Ranni's unexpected scheme, Marika needed to trick and persuade her other half, Radagon, and to do so as fast as possible to go forward with a plan that ultimately turned out to be very risky and dangerous for the overall stability of the realm. See, how these laws are defined and expressed will depend on the biases of any given outer god. The frenzy flame will have different values and predispositions compared to the Mother of Truth. In this case, let's explore the Greater Will's vessel, Elden Beast. What is its primary weakness and strength? But more importantly, why it has chosen Marika as its patron goddess. As Hayata says, all that there is came from the One Great. Then came fractures, births, and souls. But the Greater Will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, everyone born of the mistake. And so what was borrowed must be returned. Melt it all away with the yellow chaos flame, until all is one again. Remember that this is conveyed from the perspective of the frenzy flame. It sees the creation of duality, of births and souls, as a mistake, if you will. Torment, despair, affliction. This shows Frenzy Flame's bias for non-duality, which is actually inherent to existence. As the law of regression states, all things yearn eternally to converge. The polarization of duality yearns to become one again. Yellow Chaos Flame melting it all away until all is one again. Similarly, in these lines, we're seeing Greater Will's bias for duality, for self and other, yin and yang, more precisely a life-reinforcing bias. Melina before has...
I think that part right there is probably pretty safe in terms of like some of its assumptions here. Does the Greater Will want duality specifically? I don't really know. I can definitely see the sense in like trying to claim that, if you want to say like continuing life kind of would inherently imply duality if you think of life in the terms of like birth and death. But with that being said, I don't necessarily know if the non-duality of returning everything to one is necessarily anti-life in respect to whatever the Greater Will is. Like, is the Greater Will alive, or is it like amortal? Not immortal, but amortal. Like, there's like no component of life to it. That's kind of an interesting question I think we can ask ourselves in relation to this. But Anticipated had a question, and they don't mean to be rude. Why would a kindling maiden have a two fingers? That is a very good question. You may have missed it earlier in the video. Ontos believes that since Melina is a child of Marika and Radagon, in Ontos's belief here, that she is a demigod, and more specifically, he believes that Melina was an Empyrean. I strongly disagree with that because we don't really have enough evidence for it. Well, that isn't to say that she isn't an Empyrean. I just can't, prove a negative statement here. So, yeah. good question nonetheless. Appreciate it. And What's New Boys also brings up an interesting point in that the Rune of the Unborn doesn't need a finger to activate. Yeah, that's always been really strange to me. And maybe we'll learn more in the DLC, right guys? No. The DLC will solve all of our problems. Yeah, and as Eladelia says, non-duality includes splitting into three... Well, no. I would say, no, that still includes duality. So duality in, like, a philosophic sense, it means being able to differentiate between one thing and another. So that kind of includes 3, 4, 5, and 6. So non-duality means, like, there is no distinction, there is no separation. As far as I am aware, maybe there's, like, different versions or ideas of duality and non-duality I'm not familiar with, but that's what I believe Ontos is referencing here. And Jan says, friendly reminder that Melina being Marika's daughter is technically not confirmed. Yeah, she does say that she was born at the foot of the Erdtree and she needs to like visit her mother, but it is technically not confirmed. Maybe she visited the Gek when we was at Lanedell. Without horns. Nice to see you. Everyone's an Empyrean and the Mimic tier spouse of Marika. Indeed. Okay, going back to the video.
Refer to the operations of Frenzy Flame to establish lordship of a land they preside over to be lifeless. Existence and non-existence are dual concepts after all, which means the greater will is the exact opposite to the worldview Frenzy Flame embodies. It is a life bias instead. It prefers existence as opposed to non-existence, which is why the greater will was allured by Marika's desire to create an epoch glistening with life, plucking the rune of death from the laws of the universe with the Golden Order. All the outer gods, including the greater will, wants to take possession of this metaphysical substrate that is the ring, express its will, and to have unmediated access to its fundamental rules. It is unfortunate that one of the central insights related to Elden Ring is residing at the tail end of its runtime. Right after we defeat Radagon in the final boss fight, we're shown the relationship between the Elden Beast and the Elden Ring, how the former is the physical representation, while the latter is the metaphysical. It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring is sprouting inside from Radagon's body and forming physically as the Elden Beast. The insinuation is clear. Unlike what this ambiguous sentence alludes to, Elden Ring is not the golden star, but the Elden Beast itself. They're the exact...
Okay, now I kind of think I am picking up what Ontos is putting down and saying like the Twin Bird was the Elden Beast before the Elden Beast existed. Okay, so going back to the remembrance of the going back to the Elden Stars description here, I quote, "It is said that long ago the Greater Will sent a golden star bearing a beast into the lands between, which would later become the Elden Ring." So, depending on one's interpretation here, and this is kind of brilliant in a way, even though I do kind of hate it, don't get me wrong, is that it could imply that the beast is a separate thing that became the Elden Ring later. And so it becoming the Elden Ring might allow for that, the space of an interpretation to mean that an Elden Ring existed, and you could potentially argue that the Elden Beast wormed its way into it and became part of the Elden Ring, which, is definitely an idea that never crossed the shadow of my mind, but it's very interesting, even if I have like a lot of reservations about it. So maybe I would need to like take a step back and reevaluate the rest of Ontos's video, which, okay, with that in mind, maybe we can be more charitable to some of his claims. I'm doing like the mental flashbacks of like all the claims, and I still think there's like a lot of issues with like the Rune of Death and stuff, but like trying to like set that stuff aside, perhaps if Ontos like started out the video making this point, and of course, like, this is me just inferencing it right now, that the Elden Ring could pre-exist the Elden Beast, and then like the Elden Beast could have become integrated into the ring after the fact. Anyway, I'm gonna go back to chat. And Crunchy, nice to see you again. Welcome back to stream. And yeah, as Crunchy said, non-duality usually means something like a paradox, the sound of one hand clapping, or something which is both itself and its opposite. Yes. Kind of like the whole like Buddhist koans? I don't know how it's pronounced. And then Onto says, Frenzy Flame's bias is non-existence, while the Greater's will's is existence. That's what you meant. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. I just don't necessarily know if you could argue the Frenzy Flame wants non-existence, or if it wants the so-called regression back to the point of origin. So maybe you could say like that's a state of non-existence in comparison to like how existence functions now. But man, this is kind of turning into word salad. That doesn't necessarily mean that form of existence didn't exist. I don't know. Hey Chadwick, welcome back in. And Chadwick says the beast predates the ring, at least as far as you can tell. And then Alex says that would be in the theme with the parasitic thing going on with all the outer gods and their outside influences infecting the lands between. Yes. So yeah, going back to like the Japanese line of Elden Stars, it's still ambiguous. Because like Sora could be referring to the comet or the beast, but I guess it doesn't really specify that the Elden Ring didn't exist, but yeah, the most natural reading to me would be like the surface one, but that doesn't necessarily make it right, to be fair, especially with it like, you know, written as hearsay here. Yeah, I don't know. Melina wants to return to death, but she's opposed to the frenzied flame because it produces a lifeless world. If death is part of life, then the frenzied flame is opposed to both life and death. That's a good point, and I'll just kind of revert back to what I said. And, you know, I'm not willing to die on this hill. It's just like a thought experiment here. Whether or not life and death is compatible with the greater will, I think, is debatable, because, like, depending on how much one wants to believe in the words of the three fingers, which, you know, like danger alert, if they truly do want to regress to a point before like life and death and birth existed, it could just tie back into what I called the greater will's existence being amortal rather than immortal, and that life and death might be of no consequence to the greater will. But I do think that also ties into Ontos's point that like it seems as though the greater will's motivations right now is to proliferate life, which I do tend to agree with. But a lot of these issues also stem from how much one wants to believe the greater will has like an active agenda or like a plan that it's actually enacting, or if it's just as much of a like assorted feelings of like wanting to just like live, and it's not like really like an entity as much as it is just like a feeling, I suppose. Okay, I'm going to go back to the video, and thank you all for the comments. I appreciate it.
Same thing. Although the beast is currently inside America and Radagon, which represents the fundamental laws of nature as the Elden Ring, we know of a time where these laws were represented by a very different structure, and a different vessel beast altogether. A period of time where the concept of death and the crucible was at the forefront of its metaphysics, which is precisely why in the Americas era all the primordial aspects of life were repressed within the shadow of the Erdtree. As a protection of the Erdtree states, in the beginning everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, and through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. The importance of this item description can't be stressed enough, as Erdtree is synonymously used with the Elden Beast, which we've already established to be the direct representation of Elden Ring. The recusant Bernal makes it clear for us. We hunted our own kind and took what was theirs, and with everything in hand, the time has come to rise against the Erdtree. O greater will, hear my voice. I'm the recusant Bernal, inheritor of my brother's will, and you will fall to my blade. We refuse to become your pawns, consider this fair warning. Another connection comes directly from America. The Erdtree governs all, the choice is thine, become one with the order, or divest thyself of it. The Erdtree equals greater will equals the Elden Ring. Therefore, the confusion in regards to understanding when Elden Beast has arrived on the lands between is now a very simple question. When was the birth of the Erdtree? A question that has a direct answer within the lore. The war against the giants, champions battle, trolls betray, fire vanquished, the era of the Erdtree begins. America will now clearly point out that a new epoch glistening with life starts with this Erdtree, and this is precisely when the Rune of Death was plucked from the laws of the universe. Deathbirds that served an important function prior to America's order is no longer can serve that function. In this new age, Erdtree burials will be utilized to reincarnate her people as shown in the catacombs door.
All right, and so this kind of goes back into the contradiction that I mentioned earlier. If he believes the Gloam-Eyed Queen is post-America and Godfrey becoming Elden Lord and God, then how can he reconcile that the Rune of Death was removed at the beginning of her reign? Like, it just doesn't match up with the other texts in the game so far. Jan asks, how much do we know about the Greater Will anyway? NPCs seem to disagree whether it abandoned the lands between or not. We actually know very little, and this is kind of something that I consistently harp upon, that the only supposedly direct access we have to the Greater Will comes from the wriggles of the Two Fingers. We don't know, even if Marika had direct contact with it, despite the Elden Beast being in her / Radagon and whatnot. We don't know if they interpreted the words of the fingers. And so we also have an added layer of obfuscation of whether or not the finger readers are also reading the wriggles of the Two Fingers correctly. Potentially Goldmask can do it too, maybe, or Corrin at the very least. So maybe Tarnished have that ability. Maybe we don't need the finger readers, but at the very least, our dumbass player character doesn't know any better. Our uninquisitive ass that just can't ask Ranni, yo, what was that all about? But anyway, getting off that tangent point for a moment, we do have a couple item descriptions which do pretty much hint that the fingers were bent and broken long ago. So even if at one point they were accurate and did tell the full truth, we should also question whether or not what we know now is also reliable information. But yeah, I digress. I'll leave that there for now. And then friend Alex says, Erdtree equals Elden Ring sounds like Golden Order propaganda to you. I think he's trying to make a point about that age specifically. And obviously we could have our individual disagreements about what, where, and when. But right now I'm just trying to understand Cosmos's cosmology, or not Cosmos's, Antos's cosmology here, and whether or not it's consistent, because I don't really care if the ideas are super out there, as long as they're consistent to me. I think that's freaking awesome, and I like to learn more about those kind of theories, but this one just is not passing the sniff test for me so far, even though there are still some neat ideas in here regardless. Cosmos's ontology and Antos's cosmology. So I did a spoonerism. Okay, that makes me feel a bit better. Okay. Thank you, Crunchy, for pointing that out.
Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount. Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring.
I guess it's not a
age
real
of the
spoonerism,
Erdtree.
but okay.
First of all, understand that fire facilitates a destructive environment for the birth of an Erdtree. The wood and fire can't coexist. This is why the fire giants and their forge needs to be weakened first, before...
That stuff is debatable. As I've said before on previous streams, I think there's a really good chance that the Erdtree could be a pyrophyte. And pyrophyte is a term that means like pyro for fire and fight for love? Something like that? I don't remember. Anyway, what it really means is that fire for certain trees is actually a good part of their reproductive cycle, because as Ontos kind of said here, it does facilitate a destructive environment, but then I think the question becomes, a destructive environment to what? That tree specifically, or all of the other plant life around it? So if a tree is trying to drop some seeds and bud and proliferate, then the best thing for it would be if the competition got removed. And certain trees have adapted in such a way that fires can help their seeds fall by causing their resin to melt away and drop their seeds that will go into a, I don't want to say like a lush, but at least a fertile bed that has been ripened for seed growth, with like all the ash and the nutrients sinking back into the soil. And this is something you'll find in like redwood trees of California. I think cypress trees are also pyrophytic. So all that stuff aside, I think there's a good chance that that might have been part of the Erdtree's natural cycle, which might be why we need to burn it to essentially eventually regrow a new Erdtree, potentially. And that might also tie into that so-called prophecy of cardinal sin and all that stuff potentially relating to Melina and or Messmer, question mark. Yeah,
birth of an
Fireborn.
Erdtree. The wood and fire can't coexist. This is why the fire giants and their forge needs to be weakened first, before Elden Ring could take any corporeal shape. The Erdtree, even if it wanted to, could not exist in a time period where a giant's flame was burning with intensity, and we know fire giants existed long ago as ancient beings.
So this claim is also contentious because we have the little ghost where we meet in Ashen Lane Dell where he's like, haha, the tree's burning, but it still stands because it is perfection. And so could the Erdtree have existed with the Flame of Ruin still in the lands between? Potentially. And it really seems to be destined death, which facilitates the full-on burning of the Erdtree. So, yeah.
Through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order. With America's efforts on the war against the giants, only now could the Elden Ring replace the prior order and reinforce its will on the world. To tie it all together, this very important patron goddess smoothly operates the moving parts of the Golden Order, embodying the metaphysical abstraction that is the Elden Ring, and consequently the Elden Beast, directly within her corporeal flesh. Something we see within Radagon in the final boss fight. Queen Marika is the vessel of the Elden Ring, carrier of its vision, a god in truth. But after the Elden Ring's shattering, she was imprisoned in the Erdtree. This carrier of its vision line here, this is not a metaphorical expression, but a literal one. The greater will in Marika was all conjoined together, yet their ultimate goals and ambitions didn't always conjoin in a similar manner. Great runes are the stuff of demigods, the children of the goddess Queen Marika. She who is the vessel of the Elden Ring, tainted by the strength of their runes, her children warred, but none of them could become Elden Lord, and so grace was extended to your kind, the Tarnished.
So I just had a crackpot thought live on stream here. So keep in mind, this is the birth of an idea. There's probably like a lot of, things to go back through the text to see if it really holds up. But if, and this is a big if, this is a big what's the word, pretense? No, I can't think of it. If the mending runes of the Elden Ring represent the wills of those who created them, then if you had multiple runes stacked together and they're all like representative of wills, could that be a greater will than one will alone? Is the Elden Ring literally the greater will? Despite all of the hearsay that we have about the Elden Beast? I don't know how I feel about that idea, to be honest, but I might want to like double check all the text to see if that's compatible, because there could be like a lot of fronting. I mean, this is part of the reason why I don't necessarily like this idea, because like it would require a lot of lying or deception or misconceptions about like the religion of the lands between and the two fingers to like make it fully work. But if there is like a legitimate conspiracy, oh god, literally talking conspiracy theories here, maybe this idea could pan out. So anyway, I distracted myself from Ontos's stuff right here. Like I was paying attention to the video as well. I just forgot what came on stream 30 seconds ago. And yeah, Eladelia says, you think even the seeds aside, it's notable that something like Pando, the one tree forest, is perfectly capable of surviving major fires because fire couldn't kill the root system. And that's how I also feel like the Erdtree and the Great Tree and its roots operate. So I think for bringing up that example. So Ontos is back and says, plucking of Destined Death from the Elden Ring is different from Malekith sealing the Destined Death. No, I absolutely agree with you. In that regard, but I would also say Malekith sealing Destined Death is post-shattering, so the Rune of Death and the defeat of the Gloam-Eyed Queen and that stuff would still be, it would have to happen way before the shattering, because the Rune of Death is in his blade. Or okay, so you think there's like a third sealing thing almost. Okay, so removing the Rune of Death, sealing it within the blade, potentially, and then Ranni taking it from the blade, maybe? And then sealing it again? Maybe? Sorry, I might just be like jumping ahead or misinterpreting you. In that period in between, Melina was given the Destined Death by the Greater Will as an Empyrean until Malekith defeated the Gloam-Eyed Queen and sealed it as a blade. Ontos views Melina to be Marika's secret daughter, intimately linked with the birth of the Erdtree. Whether she was born as Millicent like a bud or with a secret Radagon affair is unknown. So hold on. But I feel like that doesn't work for a number of reasons, because if you assume that the Rune of Death was removed upon like the birth of the Erdtree, that's, you know, perfectly fine. Many people believe that. But then you also don't feel like the Gloam-Eyed Queen existed prior to that time. Then how would the Gloam-Eyed Queen and her followers and the Godskin Apostles be said to serve Destined Death? It seems like they're going rogue, and you're saying the Greater Will giving the Rune of Death to Melina is kind of weird to me. And I can't articulate why right now. Hey, Rich P. Anya, welcome back to the stream. Nice to see you again. Everyone really is everyone, for real though. Crunchy says, technically the Greater Will sent a star bearing a beast. Maybe it sent a star bearing itself. So that is a possible interpretation as well. And with the Newman also coming from outside the lands between, I have wondered in the past whether that star included Marika with it, or if like Marika was like part of the star, like Tinkerbell style. But I haven't like really brought that idea up like very publicly, just because it's like there's nothing to really, you know, show for it, other than if you believe that Marika was also sent and was like always the vessel of the vision of the vessel of the vision, that'd be one thing. But I also feel like just now we kind of got confirmation that Marika wasn't always a god with the Shadow of the Erdtree pre-release info, where it's like this is the land where Marika became a god. So it seems like maybe she didn't always have the ring. So maybe I might need to like rethink some like the Placidusac stuff, potentially. I don't know. Jan says, the greater will is said to have fractured the one great, so it seems something primordial. And Kent says, maybe the greater will is whoever has the greatest will. Potentially. Like, unironically, though, that's possible. Scallies says, as cool as that idea is, you really doubt Malekith without Destined Death could have beaten the Gloam-Eyed Queen with Destined Death? You know, I've never really considered that. Like, how the hell... Well, okay, no, this would make sense. So, going back to the whole Blythe thing, if you ever fight him before you kill Ron, or before you fight the Baleful Shadow, and before you, like, send Ranni on her mission to kill her two fingers, if you kill him and reload the area, he'll come back and he says, like, no harm can befall a shadow. And so the shadow-bound beasts seem to be immune to death to some degree, or like it just doesn't have the same hold on them while their two fingers are active. And of course, like during the the Baleful Shadow fight, the thing also seems to wield Destined Death, although it's kind of hard to tell if it's actual Destined Death, because like the invaders are normally red and he's got like this fiery type effect, or if it's just like black flame. Actually, I have footage. I don't remember if you lose max HP. Let me pull it up rather than speculating. Baleful. Destined Death blade check? Okay. So this is from 1.0 disclaimers. Oh, I don't have my HUD on. Did I not turn it on in this? Okay, I did. Okay. So I gotta get hit again. Alright, so the max health doesn't drain, but the current health continues to drain a little bit, so... Galamoth said, it's like God sending himself to Earth as Jesus? Yeah, maybe. Okay. Gonna go back to the video now?
Now, although the phrase great runes are the stuff of demigods implies a more intimate connection between great runes and the demigods, the Japanese is a bit more distant. If it is the great runes, the demigods have them. Now, this Japanese description doesn't entirely discount the intimate connection in the English translation. Elden Ring is a powerful substrate that defines...
Hold on, wait. What was the point? Let me...
The Japanese... And so grace was extended to your kind, the tarnished. Now, although the phrase great runes are the stuff of demigods implies a more intimate connection between great runes and the demigods, the Japanese is a bit more distant. If it is the great runes, the demigods have them. Now, this Japanese description doesn't entirely discount the intimate connection in the English translation. Elden Ring is a powerful...
He's not wrong, but I'm not sure what point he's trying to make.
Substrate that defines the laws of nature. Its shards, the great runes, are tainting America's demigods with their strength, and are tainted the body.
Right, so the consequences of the shattering, the tainted strength bestowed upon America's kin. The bloodline of America and her demigods being bolstered and strengthened by the shards broken when Elden Ring was shattered. These demigods claimed the shards and infused their power into their beings as the lore goes, tainted by their newfound strength. When the interconnected of all phenomena was broken, the shards of Elden Ring was now in a state that was open to manipulation by America's kin. You would need to substantiate this claim. Oh, to gain further strength and power via the Great Runes. Okay, I think I see what you're saying there. So, like, that's kind of a weird way to phrase it, I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, that demigods killing each other and claiming other shards of the ring means that if they gathered them all, they could manipulate the Order or the Elden Ring. I think I think that's fair if that's the argument that you're trying to make there.
The demigods in a
All right,
reciprocal
Mia,
manner.
you have a good night.
In fact,
All right, let me back up. I didn't mean to actually play it right then. Baleful Shadow may wield actual destined death after all. Maybe, and if so, it is very troubling that its powers are derived from the two fingers. But maybe there's a kind of metaphysical connection between Blaidd and Malekith and the Rune of Death. But then we come into like the weird timey-wimey stuff of like, oh, well, what if you kill Blaidd after you kill Malekith and all that fun stuff? That makes Kent's character a demigod because you got all the great runes. I mean, makes you Elden Lord. And if Godfrey became a demigod by being Elden Lord, yeah, sure, why not?
its shards, the great runes are tainting America's demigods with their strength and are tainted by the demigods in a reciprocal manner. In fact, look at how the broken parts of her body is an analogy of the shards broken from the Elden Ring upon shattering, making America's flesh linked to her demigods who are of her direct offsprings. It is obvious how these offsprings could act.
Wait, how does that connection work? I thought he was gonna talk about the Erdtree, so I was not expecting the demigod part. Alright, so who just said it? So Doggo said, you think the Baleful Shadow actually does proc bleed? You feel like you got blood in the fight once, and so it might be Blood Flame. Yeah, but Blood Flame doesn't make you continue to lose current health, right? Who's been professionally hit by Rivers of Blood and can confirm or deny? And friend Alex says, then there's Godric, who's more demi than God. Got him.
In fact, look at how the broken parts of her body is an analogy of the shards broken from the Elden Ring upon shattering, making America's flesh linked to her demigods who are of her direct offsprings. It is obvious.
Okay, I think I get what he's saying now. So he's saying that the shards of the rune are shards of her flesh, and therefore, since the demigods have shards of the great runes, they have shards of her flesh, and that's where the connection is coming in, if I'm understanding that correctly.
This is how these offsprings could access the laws of nature. Rykard is taking the form of a serpent to devour the very gods for a reason, or Radon is a giant and embodying the themes of strength and power, which were the exact themes he valued before.
Crunchy says, getting continuously hit by Rivers of Blood makes you continue to lose health. Now, I can't tell if you're shitposting or if are you actually saying you lose health like, what's it called? Like Black Flame or Destined Death style, or are you just being cheeky?
For the shattering.
Just joking. Okay, that's what I thought.
The form that each demigod embody is informed by their individual psyche, interests, worldview, core values, and most poignant desires. And the very shards of the Elden Ring is what enables this transformation from humanoid foundations. Radon and Rykard are both shown in the portraits pre-shattering with human forms. Godwin was in a human form before his assassination. Marika herself, who is already in a human form. And then we see the effects of the shattering, how the great runes have changed them. After the shattering, even the Rune of Death has started infesting and eating away at Malekith's psyche, destabilizing him further. When Marika shattered the Elden Ring, the connective tissue that stabilized the shard's power were broken, which means for her offsprings, allowing complete access to its power, the access her demigods have utilized to gain an edge in the Shattering War. Marika hoped for Miquella in specific.
Alright, so I was hoping he'd get into it a bit sooner, but I'm very curious how he feels like Moog and Morgott fit into it. If he's making this animalistic connection here. And yeah, because I'm not so sure that works out just yet.
To benefit the most from becoming a shard bearer. However, even the most meticulously designed plans fall flat in the face of future's unpredictability.
Miquella is mine and mine alone.
Leading to the subject of Radagon and Marika. How can Radagon even be America? Certainly a perplexing truth that has confused the lore community even to this day, as initially a Radica theory might make sense. The idea that they have always inhabited the same body and were always one. After all, we see their forms.
All right, so yeah, those are the kind of graphics that I think are really good for like having your text on screen, because they follow your voice, or like they, meaningfully interact with what you're directly talking about, rather than just the info dumps in other sections of the video.
Inhabited the same body and were always one. After all, we see their forms changing in front of our eyes in the final boss fight. However, all Radica theories fail to take into account multiple lore threads, and doesn't make room for one of the most important Melina quotes in the entire game. The first discrepancy resides in Goldmask's quest, where we learn the truth of Radagon is America. One of the halves of Goldmask's cogitations, which has been extensively analyzed in this episode, alludes to how Radagon America being one is a direct analogy for how Darien and Devon are also one. Darien and Devon are twins. They have separate bodies, yet represent the same yin and yang, as non-duality always does. Devon is seen in the Eternal Cities down in Siofra River, symbolizing America's origin land of Newmans, the moon in the alchemical lore, the silver and the mercury, while Darien, the Hunter of the Dead, a proud member of the Golden Order and the Erdtree, represents the opposing half, the gold, the sun, and the most importantly, sulfur. Radagon, with his fire giant origins and flowing red locks, symbolizes the sun, the gold, and the sulfur in the alchemical lore.
So this is part of the reason why I'm not a big fan of like the alchemy lens of looking at Elden Ring, because my interpretation is kind of like the exact opposite. Because if Godfrey founded like the golden lineage and America gave birth to the golden lineage, that would be the pre-Radagon times. So I would assume like America is kind of more gold affiliated specifically, whereas Radagon had to explicitly go to Raya Lucaria to learn what I would say is like the silver adjacent stuff in the form of sorcery. And he integrated all of that sorcery, the silver adjacent stuff, into the pre-existing gold faith-based stuff as of the Erdtree to create our kind of pseudo rebus here, if you ever want to hear a sentence where I actually say rebus. But anyway, yeah.
The non-dual union of the sun and the moon, Radagon and America, is shown in this image of the rebus, trampling on the very dragons we know for a fact to be defeated by Godfrey prior to America's order. I'm talking about Pseudosax. A mere coincidence? I don't think so. The truth of the matter is that both Darien and Devon, the gold and the silver, is the textbook definition of how two different beings can represent non-duality paradoxically, how they can have two bodies but one soul. How Darien is Devon, just like Radagon is America. Even if this is true, the question remains, when exactly did Radagon and America become a single being?
So that conclusion doesn't follow from the premise of the argument to say that Radagon and America must have been two initially, which I'm not trying to make a value statement one way or the other as to how, when, why they are fused into one, but so far in the game we've only seen them as one, so that's kind of like one basis which we're working from. But the D example doesn't undisputedly prove that America and Radagon had two different bodies. There's already videos saying the new horned enemy they showed is America. It's because everybody's America, bro.
Question remains, when exactly did Radagon and America become a single being, and for what purpose did they unify into a single being? Two questions that I will definitively answer. First of all, take note how there's a verbal exchange going on in the Bedchamber's quote. For America to be able to address Radagon to begin with assumes an inherent duality of self and other. two separate bodies are having a private conversation.
No. So, to give a counterexample, Melina tells us she is burned and bodiless, yet we can converse with her quite the same way that Marika could be conversing with Radagon. So obviously there's a little bit more to it. We don't know if Radagon was ever separate from Marika or vice versa. Marika could be to Radagon what Melina is to us. Marika could have been to Godfrey what Melina is to us. Or maybe even vice versa. Maybe Radagon is to Marika what Melina is to us. It's a pretty messed up thought, but I mean, you know, that doesn't mean we shouldn't think it. So, right. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe this has to say that they had like two different bodies. We're also told of Marika's mischievous nature with Marika's mischief, the mimic veil, and her changing appearances, which is kind of like a FromSoft staple, like Dark Souls 1 had like dusk and whatnot. Anyway, not too important. Let's go read the text on the screen right quick, and then I'll like look at chat. So, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god, let us be shattered, both mine other self. And then the asterisk says, up until this conversation, it is a fact that Radagon and Marika had two separate and different bodies. You know what? No, I'm done, bro. I'm just going to go ahead and dislike the video now. You know what? No, I'm done with this, guys. Like, I was fine with, like, entertaining this stuff. And I understand that people have their own interpretations, and I totally support it. But I am just over the whole "it is a fact" bullshit, to put it bluntly. Ontos, I honestly do admire the way you've edited your videos. I think they're very well done, but I'm a hater of your lore theories. I'm just going to be blunt with you at this point. I've gone over this multiple times. I do not like the way you approach the lore. You seem to put your conclusions first. You don't ever say that this is speculation. You use factual-based explanations, and you don't really seem to take in like a lot of the direct feedback that I've seen others give you in the Discord. So yeah, I'm just kind of like, I'm over it. Like, nothing personal. I do hope that your channel continues to grow and improve, but the way that you approach the lore is ultimately not for me, and I'm just kind of done entertaining this stuff. So, trying to be true to myself and my chat here. But yeah, I think that'll be it, at least for me, proceeding on with this video. So I'm just going to like talk with chat for a bit before, you know, closing out. And then Crunchy says they could have been two personas in the same body. Yes. Killer King asks a good question of, is there any bad translation in this dialogue? No, I think this is probably one of the most faithful like localizations that they've done. I know some people are like, oh, Leal Hound means like she's calling him a dog. I'm like, yeah, like that's a hound. Maybe the word Leal isn't there. Let me double check. But generally speaking, I don't think there's really anything off about this at all. Yeah, okay, so Leal isn't there. So she just calls him Dog of the Golden Order here. Leal Hound. Yeah, Radagon, Golden Order's dog. Yo. Anyway. So, going back to like the little bit mentioned here real quick. So, to say that they're two different bodies, then why would she say, let us be shattered both? Like, to me, this is like the biggest indication that they must have had one body, because how does shattering Marika shatter Radagon if they're in the same body? So to me, this is like literally right before the shattering, and then Marika and Radagon probably get imprisoned together. So, man, you just had to drive in the final nail of the coffin right there, Ontos. More Lore says, honestly, if you're ever going to do lore videos on Elden Ring, you'd be hard-pressed not to frame it through the lens of just exploring possibilities. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, like, it's perfectly fine to not, like, set any of this up. It's a perfect stylistic choice, but it's not one that I am on board with at this point anymore. Kent says, Hound can mean many things other than, like, I mean, I feel like the dog indication is still pretty good here. Like, you could argue that like a hound might have like a certain purpose, and there might be like a certain bit of what's the word? Not context. Inference? No. I'm losing my mind. It's too late in the night. Interpretation? Definitely not. Anyway, it might have a certain amount of meaning beyond just dog that I might not be considering right now, but I really don't think this is bad by any means. Radagon is America's light hound. Gloam-Eyed Queen is America's astral form like Ranni, and Malekith is that hound. He never killed the Gloam-Eyed Queen. He already works for her. Okay. Godfrey was hounded from the lands between. Godric was hounded from the capital. I might be missing some context there. Killer King says dog/hound was clearly an insult. America at this point was done with a greater will. Yes. She's saying, try all you want to stop me, but I'm shattering this ring and the both of us. Doggo says, most cases you can think of people being called dogs in Japanese media is that they're like a pawn in service. Edward Eldrick being called a dog in the military, for example. I mean, but is that not what hound means? It's a dog in a specific capacity of like servitude of, you know, more specifically like hunters or trackers. Right, hound can mean to go after something, but that would mean that would be a verb, whereas this is clearly a noun. Like, quit hounding me? Where it's like, well, hounding, I guess, is technically a noun as a gerund there, but no. It's a verb there. But it can be a gerund. Anyway. How do I rationalize the conversation taking place as a single body? Like I just said, like, how can they both be shattered if they're of different bodies? It definitely shows that Marika and Radagon are metaphysically connected, if not physically, but there's nothing to say to make it an actual fact that they are different bodies. And yeah, of course, like the hound in Game of Thrones is a different thing, but that's also a proper noun. Eladelia says, Malekith and Blythe are hounds too. They have dog heads, and the tarnished with the wolf armor aspire to that kind of position. You don't think it's entirely bad? No, I don't think it's bad at all. Yeah, as Jan says, hound is a loyal hunting dog. So certainly, like, as far as the English goes, like, calling him a hound could imply that he's, like, on the hunt and stuff, which, you know, if people want to, like, take umbrage with that, that's perfectly fine. As far as, like, an actual localization goes and trying to make Marika sound like a regal godlike figure, I think calling him the hound helps personify that characterization. But if somebody did want to be more of a purist, and actually, let me double check if she does, like, use honorifics here. Maybe this should be a little bit more brusque in the English. Yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So maybe, okay, looking at the Japanese here, I could see a case being made that maybe Marika is speaking a bit too formally in the English here, because thou art, as far as, like, we are concerned in, like, modern times, like, thou is extremely formal language, whereas in this form of address, Marika refers to Radagon as omae, which is very casual and is not formal. So it's kind of hard to emphasize how much stank to put on English when trying to, like, make this stuff work. So yeah. Okay, so another man, I don't really like talking about this because like this is one of those things where you can't necessarily tell if America is speaking literally or if the Japanese should be taken literally or if it's all like metaphor or like whatnot. So when she says, "Let us be shattered both, mine other self," she says, "Waga hanshin yo." And so hanshin, the characters literally mean half body, but that it's not like a real word in a lot of ways. Like it's kind of like a made up fantasy term. So this could be understood as like my other half, like my significant other almost. Latenna refers to Lobo as hanshin as well, and they certainly don't share a body. So I don't think I could comfortably say that, oh, like this implies that they're all the one, like they're literally one body, because we do get like contrary text in other circumstances to like not fully support this. But anyway, "Let us be shattered both, mine other self" reads more naturally to me as though they're one body. But even if you want to argue that like Radagon has some metaphysical connection to America, then when do they fuse? Is it when Radagon tries to mend the Elden Ring? Maybe somebody could argue that, but at the very least, I will still actually die on this lore hill that I would argue that it is not a fact that Radagon and America were separate up until this point. It's just a strong belief at the most. Crunchy asks, "Isn't Omae also kind of a double meaning? It's uber respectful, but is used to be informal in a slightly derogatory way in some contexts." I mean, definitely not in like modern usage. No, because like Omae, so like the characters literally mean like honored one in like honored in front of me. Like the thing in front of me is essentially what it is. But to say like the thing in front of me is almost like the equivalent in English of saying something like "this bitch." Temai or teme is like the same kind of like vibe that you kind of get from it. So if you're gonna say "this bitch" to somebody like in front of you, you probably want to have a closer like relationship than just like a stranger you met off the street. Like if you say something like "oh my" to somebody in like the wrong circumstance, like that could literally piss somebody off and like can almost be grounds for a fight. So yeah. Throne681, welcome into the stream. Nice to have you here. Is it just you? Did you also change your name? Because I actually don't recognize that. Is it just you, or is Miquella a kid in his physical form, but an adult in his weird DLC spirit form? So that's a good question, and that might be answered due to like his potential growth in the cocoon, maybe, or whether or not the Shadowlands are kind of like a dreamland or something like that. We're told that that Miquella had to discard his Empyrean flesh and like his gold and whatnot, so that might help explain it. And we're also told that Saint Trina, if that is still Miquella, and at least, is also depicted as an adult on the torch rather unnervingly. So there is some grounds of like an adult Miquella already established in the lore. Yeah, so when she says "you are not yet me," she's saying you are not yet a god. So if you read this line super literally, I understand why you'd think that they're two different people. But the way that I've always interpreted this line, and of course this is my personal interpretation here, is that she is differentiating their respective roles in relation to each other. So because America is the god, she is the vessel. In this case, it seems she's making the claim that Radagon is overstepping his bounds from Elden Lord into trying to become the god and become like the vessel or something along those lines. And Radagon may have inadvertently usurped a large part of America's order. And that's like super speculative stuff right there. And so she's saying, I'm going to like be done with this order and revert to a time before like this order could really represent me. So she seems to fully turn her back on the Golden Order, which is why she calls him a dog of the Golden Order. So yeah, that's kind of always been my read on that situation there. Killer King asks, any idea why America was a god and Radagon wasn't, even in the same body? Yet, at least. So that's a very good question. I wish we had more info about that myself. It seems like even though America and Radagon are one, they aren't complete, they aren't whole, they aren't perfect. And we do have some hints to that as far as like Radagon aspiring to be complete in some item description, which I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not really worth looking up. We also have the fact that Melania's Great Rune says that because she was born of a single person god, her Great Rune should have been the most holy of all. But both Miquella and Melania were born cursed with eternal youth and like boundless growth, as I referred to them. So they were afflicted at birth. They're cursed. They are not perfect children of a perfect being, which I think is supposed to be a big hint as to like the imperfect state of America and Radagon, I guess. Oh, you're okay. I see what you're saying, Crunchy. That because of how it's been adopted into common usage, it has a kind of super informal, maybe disrespectful snark to it. Honestly, I don't remember enough about the etymology of Omai to know if it's ever been considered respectful. I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't think I've ever seen anything to substantiate that, unless it might have been like used in a literary form before it like took on those connotations. Maybe somewhere in like poetry or like waka. I mean, waka is poetry. Yeah, so I just don't know. I would need to like do some like fact checking, but at the very least, in like everyday usage, it isn't like respectful. But yeah. Doggo says, if Radagon is just another persona that she created to exist to oppose her, he's not really God until they become her equal. And of course that raises the question, can he become her equal? Or is there something fundamentally flawed with the way that America and Radagon and their roles work together? Because Godfrey, allegedly exists separately from America and may have always been separate from her. And his role as Elden Lord was like kind of perfect, but it wasn't eternal, which wasn't good enough for America. And so she may have discarded him for eternal. And maybe just the idea of eternity is meant to be understood as inherently imperfect because stagnation and all that bad stuff. Like things can't last forever. That's bad. Things need to change to like grow and for life to fully thrive, perhaps. What's New Boys says Japanese calls him Golden Order, Radagon, so he's a dog to himself? I think so, yes. And of course, like, this is something that I've brought up many times before, like, the idea of the religion versus the instantiation of the order in the Elden Ring could be two different ideas, so she could be talking about the religion versus, like, him being part of the Elden Ring. So, with that being said, I do think you kind of inadvertently raise an interesting point of, like, how can Radagon not be loyal to himself and to some degree because of like his connection to the Elden Ring and Marika. So this is most obviously Marika turning her back on the order, the so-called fly in the ointment as elucidated to us via Goldmask's quest. Every time Jan hears Omae, you think of Omae wa mou shindeiru. Indeed. Sayo. Ontos says, by that logic, why would Marika say, let us be shattered both, if Marika doesn't want Radagon to have further control? Well, I mean, if Marika is the dominant personality, how could, like, Radagon wrest control from her? It might also be that, like, by Marika shattering herself, she might just be, like, fleeing. So I've wondered whether or not Marika shattering herself could break off of, like, the main chunk of her personality or her memories or something into a different form. Perhaps Melina, but that's just a pretty big speculation on my part right there. And then Killer King says, at the beginning, Ania says your goal is to become consort. Weird how America has no choice on who her consort is and has to accept literally anyone, even a different personality inhabiting her. Yeah, I don't know necessarily about the different personality inhabiting her, unless you're like talking about like the Ranni ending or something like that. I do wish like we saw more of America in any of the endings. Like if the Elden Ring is like fixed or like mended, like does Marika come back to life? Is she gone? And if she's gone, is that more support for like Melina having been part of her? I don't know. Like, are we a god? It doesn't seem so. Do we have a god? Marika, but like is she just a vessel? Is she no longer a being at that point? All right, Ontos, I appreciate you sticking around for the duration of the video and like letting me, vent my frustrations at time and like being a very good sport about that. I do highly respect that aspect of you, but yeah, I'm kind of like done and over it at this point, which I apologize for. I wish like that I would continue, but honestly, I think that's kind of just like flowery words. I don't really wish that, to be like perfectly honest. Like, I do wish that I enjoyed the video more. I could say that much, but I'm just kind of like over the presentation style. With that being said, as I said momentarily ago, I do think you've done some like really good stuff with your editing. It's been quite on point for like most of the video. I really liked a lot of the transitions, especially the one when you had like the 4 screens on your screen at once, or like the 4 smaller screens. So I think these are pretty well produced videos. I do enjoy them. It's just like the lore stuff that I can't really be on board with anymore. No, this will be the end of the stream. Yeah, I've gone way over like my, sort of established time. So I do try to end like 3 hours after stream, and I'll just like keep going as like the content dictates. But since I haven't like really decided to continue watching the video, I was just gonna like interact with chat a bit more to like try to take some of the sting away, which I may or may not have done. So anyway, yeah, that'll more or less conclude tonight's stream. Thank you all so much for joining in. Ontos, thank you so much for joining. Sorry it didn't go as positively as I would have liked, but I'm also just trying to give you like my true critique and feedback here, which I hope you can appreciate. So even though that I did dislike the video publicly and whatnot, I'm going to go ahead and link it into chat if you guys want to continue to watch the rest of it without me, and or give Ontos some more love in the forms of likes to counteract my dislike. That's perfectly welcome. But yeah, that'll pretty much be it for me for tonight. We will go live again tomorrow at the same standard time, or today as always, of 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So hopefully we'll catch you on the next stream. Till then, take care, stay safe. Last Protagonist out.